Tax season is here, which means you've received or are expecting that tax refund any day now, and you're thinking about what to spend it on. How about a new home? With SaveWithConrad.com, we're helping renters become homeowners every single day, and it's more affordable than you think. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need a huge down payment. In fact, you may not need a down payment at all. At SaveWithConrad.com, we take the stress out of the home buying process. We'll determine your buying power. We'll even help you find a realtor. And unlike the banks, we don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. So if you're not ready right now, we'll get you on a plan to be ready. Stop throwing your money away, paying someone else's mortgage with your rent, and start the path towards owning your own home today at SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad, I'm doing great. Almost, I'm like the Doc Holliday from Tombstone when I was flying over to do the deal with Ron over in the UK for the love of wrestling. I was like the lunger, the tuberculosis guy that was coughing on the plane that everybody wanted to throw me off like Jonah on the way to Nineveh. Throw the sick bastard to the well.
Well, how was For the Love of Wrestling? Did you have a good time?
Awesome time. Those guys run such a wonderful show. They run a wonderful wrestling event. Everything was fantastic. I mean, there's so many people over there. You know, things that what I missed so much in COVID was seeing the boys, you know, and seeing the guys. And that's one thing a lot of guys talk about as they get older. You know, you enjoy being around the guys. You enjoy being around the fans too. You're fun. They bring up great memories. But it was so well done. The place was absolutely packed. They have it done with Valerie does the Q&A. They had it perfect with the pictures, with all the signings. It was a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed going over to England.
All I've ever heard is great stuff. Be sure to check out For the Love of Wrestling the next time they're in your neck of the woods.
And by the way, Fredo is my favorite person on the planet.
Okay.
I love Fredo. Fredo is I love that guy. You know, he's the Scottish wrestler. You know, he does a lot of entertaining, sometimes comedy stuff, but just entertaining as he could be. I was so happy I got to see him.
Motherfucker, you mean Grado?
Whatever. Fredo Grado. He's Scottish. You can't understand him anyway.
I thought you were fucking making a damn Godfather reference.
Well, maybe it's, yeah.
I know it was you, Fredo.
Well, I should have shot him in a boat. I don't know. Grado, whatever. Grado, Fredo.
Yeah, you Fredo eating motherfucker. We love you, Grado. Hey, John, I got to ask you the big breaking news over the weekend, of course. The Rock, he came back, SmackDown on USA, shaking it all up. Did you get a chance to catch the appearance? What'd you think?
I did. I thought it was strange, and I thought it was probably supposed to be strange. You know, sometimes you do stuff that you don't have a finish to. That's why you call it episodic television, and I thought that's what that was. I have no idea what I'm going to take your soul. I don't think anybody else does. I thought it was incredibly well done. It looked uncomfortable. And I think that's how it was supposed to look. I thought it was incredibly well done. And by the way, you got the biggest movie star in the last 20 years coming back to WWE. There's no downside to this. You know, this is, you know, a lot of people have always gotten mad about guys coming back. You know, we got mad about the Warrior coming back, about Sid coming back, about Hogan coming back, about The Rock coming back. Look, if you're big enough, you don't need them. But there ain't nobody bigger than that man. And so it's always great to have something like that come back because it really does help the show.
It makes a lot of sense that they would bring him back, especially with the announcement of WrestleMania in New Orleans immediately following with a press conference. I mean, why not milk The Rock's appearance and get whatever media coverage you can? Totally makes sense to use him for the WrestleMania announcement. I guess we'll see what it means storyline-wise. But he did announce he'll be at Elimination Chamber, which makes that show feel even bigger, with John Cena and The Rock both on that show at the Sky Dome in Toronto. It's coming up this weekend. John, you've been around a lot of Elimination Chamber matches in your day. Do you have a prediction this year for the Elimination Chamber? Everybody has John Cena circled. Is that what you'd like to see too, or is there another idea?
Hey, I was wrong at the Royal Rumble, and I was happy I was wrong because I love Jey Uso, and I thought the swerve was really well done. Yes, I'm doubling down on John Cena. I think that promo he cut was just magnificent, and there's only one like him. I think throw him a bone. I hope he goes over. I'm excited that he's there. I was in Elimination Chamber, and one time, I think I was in just one, and Umaga, you know, he played high school football in Samoa, barefoot. So imagine looking back and seeing this 245-pound huge Samoan back there in the backfield in a football game barefoot. Like, dude, we quit. We forfeit. We don't want to play you guys. He was walking across the grate. Now, that's how tough he is. He was walking across the grate, and I saw his feet were hurting. And I thought, if that big tough son of a bitch's feet are hurting, don't open this fucking pod. Whatever you do, don't open this pod. And right when I was thinking this, some fan is out there like on the third or fourth row and says, hey, JBL, you fat ass, what are you doing in there? And I look back, I go, I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, I was hoping my pod would never open. Unfortunately, it did.
Yeah, No Way Out, 2008. We go back to February of 2008, 17 years ago. It was Triple H, Chris Jericho, Jeff Hardy, JBL, Shawn Michaels, and Umaga. I kind of forgot you were in Elimination Chamber. Like, of all of these sort of gimmick matches that are out there, is that the most dangerous one? Is that the most devastating one?
No doubt about it. When they first built it, there was nothing on that structure that didn't hurt. I mean, nothing. It looked like a terrific idea. I don't know I think Jericho maybe came up with the original idea, is what I heard. I know maybe Hell in a Cell. I'm not sure. Anyway, the original idea, there was nothing about it that was safe. Everything on that thing hurt, and nothing made a noise. So it's the worst of everything. You hit a freaking floor, it's just a thud. No noise, but it almost breaks your back. It was like the Punjabi prison match. When they first built that thing, it looked like bamboo, but it was solid steel.
Oh, shit.
When you hit that thing, it hurt. Anything that touched that thing hurt, but it looked fake. So when you're hitting it, it's like the worst of everything. You're getting beat to hell, and the crowd's not reacting because it doesn't look real. That's how the chamber was when it first started. They've since made it a lot better. I was glad I was in one, but I didn't want to be in two.
What a rib. I mean, you would think if we're creating a new gimmick match for wrestling, we would keep like sound and safety in mind, but I guess they're like, they'll figure it out.
Right. Because they always mic, Fritz was one of the first ones to mic the ring and, had, several cameras, mic'd up the ring and, it's been done for years. And then they would, now they have, some type of things that are underneath the grates and stuff. When it hits, it rattles, it makes a sound. But when you first build it, it was just like we're going to build something indestructible. Okay. That's good because the boys aren't indestructible.
Did you know that there was, I don't know how I didn't know this, but as I was going over to cagematch.net to figure out exactly when you were in an elimination chamber, because I'll admit, I wasn't watching in 08. That was a blind spot for me. I didn't know. So I typed in your last name. Did you know there was a guy who called himself, instead of JBL, he was IBL? Insane Bradshaw Layfield. Did you know about this?
No, never heard it.
There's a wrestler from Canada.
Really?
Who I guess also wrestled under the name Bill Coltrane. And he had the gimmick name Insane Bradshaw Layfield. IBL. How great is that?
I love it. Guys used to, Tracy Smothers, and if, I thought it was a rib at the time, found out later from his friends it was a rib. But he would go around and he would imitate me with the big belly and the suit and everything. And I thought, man, I need to send this guy a check. I mean, all he's doing is promoting me. Right. Effie recently went out as, Effie's a gay man that's a wrestler. And he went out as JBL. And I said, I saw him like right after that. I said, Effie, that is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I love stuff like that.
JBL is such
JBL. He had JBL. He had the cowboy hat and everything. It was fantastic. I saw him. And I said, man, I went straight to him. I said, I want to tell you that was fantastic.
Well, listen, everybody is sort of waiting with bated breath to see what WrestleMania is going to look like. And we feel like we know some of the matches. Like we know it's going to be Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton. And a lot of people are speculating that if John Cena wins the Elimination Chamber, maybe it'll be John Cena and Cody Rhodes. That was a report that we saw a few months ago from Dave Meltzer. But what is the other match? There was speculation that maybe there was going to be a three-way match, but now people are wondering, John, are we going to get Rock and Roman this year? Do you have a WrestleMania prediction? What does Roman Reigns wind up doing this year? Does The Rock wind up wrestling?
I think there's a chance. Yeah. Because I think The Rock loves wrestling. I think deep down, The Rock really enjoys wrestling, and he's always loved the business. And, grew up in the business. It's always been a part of his blood. He's really good at it, by the way. I'd love to see him wrestle. I don't know if he will or not. It's kind of, you never know what's a swerve and what isn't. When he said Cody and he don't have to culminate in a match, I thought it was a great thing that he said. Now, whether that is true or not is different, because whether he's working or whatever else, and good grief. I hope he's working this, because I enjoy being worked. I enjoy swerves coming, and I enjoy having the fun of being surprised. I'd love to see Rock in a match, and I'd love to see Rock versus Roman. I think that's one of the most interesting things that's out there.
Well, we're going to stay tuned this weekend. Of course, it's all going to come to a head. I also wanted to ask, did you have a chance to catch the Australian show this past weekend? Anytime there's an international show, it feels like it makes headlines. We hear it's one of the third biggest gates of all time for that promotion. And, man, they had a hot crowd. What'd you think?
Yeah, I caught the social media stuff of it. I rarely watch, full pay-per-views, full shows. I catch a lot of social media clips, and that's why I keep up with it. It looked like it was a great show. I know they're disappointed because they went from an arena down to a stadium down to an arena, but you're still selling something out that's pretty big, and you're still putting a lot of people in there. And with fewer matches, which I think is a key. I've been surprised WWE, how few matches they're having, and it works. You're letting these guys tell magnificent stories of 20, 30 minutes. And maybe that's where they're picking it up from, instead of just hot-shotting everything.
Well, I, for one, am looking forward to a big year in professional wrestling in 2025. And there's lots of rumor and innuendo. There's lots of speculation out there. You never know what's going to happen next. And maybe that's why we love talking about it so much. But our topic today is something we haven't spent a lot of time talking about. Global, the GWF. Bruce and I have discussed his time in Global in the archives, available at somethingtowrestle.com. But, well, that was sort of a refuge for Bruce Prichard. But really, Global is helping you sort of kickstart your career, right, John?
Yeah, that was my first job. And, it wasn't because I'd seen him on ESPN or anything else. I'd grown up watching the Sportatorium, and I knew that was the center of the universe. That was the center of wrestling. And so when I went up and trained with Brad Reingens up in Minnesota, I'd spent several months up there. I didn't have anywhere to go. I think Portland had a little bit of a territory at that time. They're running again, I believe. They had fallen off big, and I think they opened up a little bit. Tennessee was running a little bit, but there wasn't much money. Wasn't any money in Texas either, by the way. But I wanted to be at the Sportatorium. That's what I grew up watching. That's what I watched with my grandfather, and that's really where I wanted to start.
I mean, we don't have to get into specifics if you don't want to, but was wrestling paying a living wage at the time, or was it just a dream and you knew, like, hey, man, this is not sustainable. Something's got to shake loose, but I'm paying my dues.
Good Lord, no, it wasn't paying a living wage, not even close. My first match, I come down, I've told you this story before, and I'm happy to tell it again, where I end up in a match with Rod Price, I believe for the North American title or something at the time. I don't know if the title was online. Anyway, ended up in a main event top match, my first match, and I got paid $25. I thought I'd get, the place was packed. Now understand, Gray Pearson was the one that was running Global at the time. He had a great business model, and it really was. He let people in for free, but he charged pretty high parking rates, and he got all the concessions. So he was making, I think, pretty good money by this business model. So the crowd was always full. People say, well, you guys weren't drawing that. No, we were drawing a ton. Nobody was paying for tickets, but Gray was making pretty good money because he had to pay for parking, and he got all the concessions. So it was a pretty good business model, and it looked fantastic on television, but we weren't making any money. Now, I think later I got up to $50 or $75 for main event matches, but still, that's the biggest show of the freaking week. I went and worked for Killer Tim Brooks at the Villa Inn. It was in Garland. Killer ran a couple shows. He ran Villa Inn in Garland, and he ran the old Longhorn Ballroom, which is right down the street from the Sportatorium. Famous old country western bar and rock bar. And I remember I got $10 from Killer because Killer really liked me. And so this sounds crazy, but Killer really liked me. He loved who I trained with Brad Reingens, and Killer was taking care of me. He appreciated the big tough Texan guys, and he gave me $10, And one of the guys quit that was a veteran because he got 5. And I thought,
Oh my
so
God.
you'd have been happy with 10? If you'd walked out with 10, you go, yeah, I got a pocket full of money now, buddy. I'm going to buy something. So, yeah, we weren't making any money. We worked several nights a week. We worked 4 to 6 nights a week probably, but we weren't making over $25 for anything. Now, some of the older guys were. So like Rod Price was champion. He was getting a little bit more money. He may be getting as much as $100. But again, that's not enough to live off of.
So chat me up. When you're saying you were training with Brad, I've never really spent any time talking to anyone who trained with Brad. Did he have a traditional school? Was it more primitive in a barn like Vern Gagne? Like, what was it like training with Brad?
It was awesome. I love Brad Reingens, and I'm so fortunate and lucky to be able to go up there. Brad was the 1980 Greco-Roman world champion. They say he's probably USA's best Greco-Roman. He would have been the gold medalist, but that's when Carter boycotted because of the Russia Olympics. And Brad had this incredible reputation, man. He was, if they had UFC back then, Brad would have been champion for a very long time. He's the one guy that could probably handle Billy Robinson, maybe Jack Briscoe also. Not he could handle Jack Briscoe. Jack, had that famous wrestling match with Billy down in a hotel down in Australia that neither one would talk about, but apparently it was a hell of a fight. Brad was wonderful. So I went down. I got hold of Brad. I was playing in the World Football League, the World League of American Football. I was playing in San Antonio. Jason Garrett was our quarterback, who ended up being the coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
Mike Riley, who coached at Nebraska, was our coach. Wonderful man. Benson, whose brother on the Saints, was the owner. Terrific guy. I loved being down there. And the second season, I got cut. And I'd met Randy Thornton, who had wrestled in Japan. And he is telling me about the wrestling. I'd always wanted to be a wrestler. I just was hoping I'd play football a long time. But when football didn't pan out, I asked Randy, I said, how do you get trained? And he said, the best trainer in the world is Brad Reingens. And I said, well, is that who trained you? He said, yeah. I said, and I can't remember if Randy gave me the number or if I looked it up. This is before the internet. So if I looked it up, it was obviously not very easy to do. I got hold of Brad on a cold call. And he said, who are you? And I said, hey, I just played pro football. I'm a lifetime wrestling fan. I got cut. I want to come up and train if I can. And Brad took me in. He said, come on up. I was like $2,500 or something at the time. He hooked me up with a place to stay in a basement of a friend of his. And we trained in his basement. And we trained, like Greco-Roman guys, man. It was beyond subhuman sometimes. We had Frank Anderson was there, world champion out of Sweden, that would train with us. Reggie Bennett, the lady wrestler, who's a fantastic wrestler. Charlie Norris was up there training guys. But a lot of the Minnesota guys would come through there. He helped train the Road Warriors. He trained Vader. He trained Brock. Brad was one of the best trainers in the world. And back then, you got your calling card by trainers. So if you were trained by Hiro Matsuda, if you're trained by Billy Robinson, if you're trained by Gotch, or you trained by Reingens, you got jobs because of who you train with. And when I got up there, we had to shoot for conditioning. And so Brad, I'm this guy that comes just out of football. You could tell Brad is salivating to get me on the mat. He stretched me for months. I mean, just day after day after day. I loved it. I'm out there with a freaking world champion. And I think, this is awesome. Now, he beat me every single time, but he never hurt me. He could have. He never abused me. So when people say it's so hard, people talk a lot of stuff about Hiro Matsuda, people talk about Billy Robinson. Brad was not like that. Brad was not a guy who took advantage of guys. Brad was a guy who trained you incredibly hard. We had a stupid tree. It was about a 5 or 6 foot tall tree. It was so smooth from guys suplexing it. And you would sit there and you have this huge log. All you do is suplex it. You'd suplex this freaking log all over the place. It was really, really hard. But I loved it. I mean, I love the work. I love being part of it. And Brad was such a charismatic guy, this great world champion, that I just thought, man, this is exactly where I want to be.
Man, I love to hear you talk about that. And I think about Brad, I think he's probably one of those classic trainers in pro wrestling. Like, look at the laundry list of guys he put in. Like, there's such history there. And now you're a member of that club that I'll admit I didn't know. But Brad's a true classic, and that's what we're talking about today. They're a sponsor today. We're talking premium clothes at an affordable price. You can actually build the perfect outfit in 5 minutes or less. Everything goes great together at True Classic. And this is perfect, man. And I'm talking to you. If you're looking for something that feels good and looks good, we're saying the best-selling t-shirts, hoodies, jeans, and more. But now in 3, 6, and 9 packs. You see, the more you bundle, the more you save. And if you're like me, man, fit is most important. When we get something that fits us right, hey, we want more of it. That's why I love True Classic. Man, getting a 9-pack, sign me up. These shirts are designed to showcase your best features. They're going to give you that perfect fit feel. We're talking snug in the arms and chest and just the right amount of room in the midsection. They've also still got you covered if you got cold weather in your neck of the woods. It's like 19 in Alabama last week here. So I broke out the long sleeve Henleys. They got fleece hoodies too, jeans, button-ups, joggers. You can mix and match your clothing to work with your lifestyle. They got free shipping on all their orders. There's a 100% fit guarantee. I'm talking a 100% perfect fit. They've also got easy returns. And that's the reason True Classic has more than 4 million customers and over 200,000 5-star reviews. Level up your date night or everyday style with clothes that actually fit right. Just go to our exclusive link at trueclassic.com/STW to save. That's trueclassic.com/STW to save. Shop now and elevate your wardrobe today. So, John, we're learning a little bit about Brad, but I've also heard you give some credit to like Black Bart and Johnny Mantell. How does that work in your training? Is that sort of phase one is Brad in Minnesota and then Black Bart and Johnny Mantell in Texas? Or talk me through that.
That's exactly what it is. Brad's the one that trained me. Unequivocally, Brad's the one that trained me and got me through and got me ready. And by the way, people always ask, were there other people in your class? There were 2 other people in my class, and I don't even remember their names. They never made it in wrestling, to my knowledge. They were never around. So I have no idea what happened to those guys. But when I went down to Dallas, Brad had such a big name that when I knocked on the door, it was like 4:00 in the afternoon, and James Beard answered. Literally, he goes, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I want a job." And he just started laughing. He goes, "Are you a wrestler?" I said, "Well, I don't know if I am or not. I've been trained." And I just started laughing. I had my bag with me. I didn't know how to put all this stuff on, And so he said, "Who trained you?" And I said, "Brad Reingens." And when I did, it just literally like, "Come in." And he took me straight to Akbar, and he goes, "Brad Reingens trained this guy." And Akbar says, "What have you done?" I said, "Well, I was a football player. I played a little pro football. I was the All-American out of Abilene Christian." And I said, I went and trained with Brad. And I just got done. And I said, I haven't had any matches. I don't know anything about the business. But because Brad trained me, I was in, absolutely in. That's how big a name he had at the time. But when I got down there, you got to understand, when we were trained, this is always interesting to me when I talk to the guys about training. I wasn't smartened up to anything. Black Bart will say I was never smartened up, but I would never smarten up to anything. I wasn't smart enough to Carney. I wasn't smart enough to kayfabe, the phrase itself. I wasn't smart enough to matches, how finishes work. We would just do stuff. That's all we'd do. I remember asking Brad one time, he had a match he was showing us just for learning. And he said something about doing the jizob. And I had no idea what he said because I didn't know Carney. And I said, "Well, who won the match?" He goes, "Oh, I don't remember." He just, shut it off, just playing. But, back then you didn't get smart enough to anything. It wasn't like you thought it was a shoot. You did not, but you weren't smart enough to a lot of stuff in the business. And so when I got down to Texas, there always was guys like Black Bart that they would put you in the ring with that would teach you on the job. Bart did that with Dustin Runnels. Tony St. Clair did that with me in Europe. Finley did that with guys. Bart was one of those guys. So they stuck me out there with Bart, and Bart would walk me through everything. Not one time did we talk over even the finish in the back. We would just go out there, and Bart would say, "Just listen to me, kid." And I would sit there, and every once in a while I'd try to call something, and Bart would tell me afterwards whether it made sense or not. For the most part, I just listened, and Bart was basically a finisher for guys. That you always had guys like that in the territory, and Bart was one of those guys. Now, Johnny Mantell, no. I worked with Johnny a lot, but he was not. Johnny may have been the same role. He tagged with Bart, but, it was kind of – and Johnny did help me a ton. I got a lot of love and respect for Johnny, but he did not work with me like Bart did.
Let's talk a little bit about, global just as a whole. We've talked a little bit about global in the archives, but as a reminder, there is an opportunity here to build a new promotion that I guess falls in the lap of Joe Pedicino. So Joe Pedicino is a major figure from that era of pro wrestling, and he had a channel out of Atlanta where he would program like a marathon block of pro wrestling from all over the country. And he would have his wife do the wraparounds. She was a very attractive lady, and one of these fellows who winds up watching the programming based out of Atlanta is a man who claims to be a Nigerian multimillionaire businessman who comes to visit Joe one day and says, "Hey, I want to invest $25 million in a new startup national wrestling company, and I want you to run it, Joe." And I guess everybody's, radar goes off that thinks, I don't know if this sounds all the way legit. But I guess Joe checked him out, and some business people that he knew in Atlanta verified that, no, they knew this guy, and it was legit. Well, as you may imagine, it wasn't legit. But I think at that point, maybe people knew what was real and what wasn't. What had you heard about Global when you get to the company?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I knew nothing about anything. I didn't read the dirt sheets. I never did. When we first started, if you had dirt sheets, you'd be fired with dirt sheets. Guys that wasn't something you did. And Brad's old school. I mean, you're not having damn dirt sheets in Brad's school. He's sitting there training guys in a basement in a dungeon with a tree. You're suplexing a tree. Last thing you got is some freaking dirt sheet hanging around that, you're just trying to survive. So I didn't know anything about anybody. I didn't know anything about WWE. I didn't know anything about WCW. I didn't know anything about Crockett. I didn't know anything about Portland. Didn't know anything about Japan, Mexico, Europe. You name the territory. I knew absolutely nothing about it. Just what I heard anecdotally from the wrestlers, and nobody was talking about Global. When they knew they had the ESPN deal, they also knew they weren't making any money. So it wasn't that big a deal. You look like stars, but they knew they weren't making any money. So no one talked about Global.
It's interesting because there's always two sides to the story, even about Global. Gary Pearson is going to have a version of Global Wrestling, and it's a different model where he's going to stop using so many fly-ins. He's going to cater to the hardcore, diehard, few hundred fans who want their usual seats at the Sportatorium. But he's going to blanket all of Dallas with comp tickets to try to fill it up and make it look good for TV. And that got criticized a lot in the newsletters. And people would call, Gray Pearson a money mark and things like that because he didn't understand business and he's giving tickets away. But your buddy James Beard says actually quite the opposite.
Yep.
He was the permanent tenant of the Sportatorium, so he got to keep all the concessions. So if you understand like the comedy club business model, if you don't have an act that's selling a bunch of tickets, the comedy club will give away a bunch of tickets because they want you to come in and they have a 2-item minimum. They want you to, use their restaurant. I mean, on some level, that's what comedy clubs often exist to do, is sell you booze and sell you food, mark it up. And this guarantees that they're going to have a full house because they've got a headliner. So I get that business model of, hey, let's just get them in here and get them drinking and get them eating, and we're going to make money one way or another. When you first get to Global, is this really your first exposure of how the business works? And what sort of shocked you the most about just the dynamic of how these promotions operate?
Well, now also Gray you had to pay for parking. So
yeah. Okay.
Everybody who came in, he had really good parking attendants who would not let anybody sneak in. So, I mean, Gray created a really good business plan. I liked Gray a lot. Well, I hope we're going to get him on our show with me and Jerry sometime soon. One of his friends kind of reached out to us. But I liked Gray. Gray was I think a very honest guy, a very good guy. Akbar ran the booking for the most part, to my understanding. I don't think that was Gray. Now, maybe some of the actors that came in was, that was something that Ack would not have done. So that was definitely Gray. But Gray had figured out a different business model. I mean, we couldn't. Crockett came in later and tried to go back to a paid model for the Sportatorium. I mean, we had put 70 people in that huge building. I mean, it was terrible. People were not used to paying. They'd been papering that building for a very long time. And anybody out there has ever been to the Sportatorium on the corner of Katie's and Industrials, the lot is still there. There's a little river there, creek that was full of pollution, a little liquor store that had a bunch of homeless people at it. This was in the hood. I mean, in the hood. So you had the Sportatorium right down the street. You had the Longhorn Ballroom. This was in the hood. And so I can't emphasize that enough. It was hard to get people to come there, especially if you're going to pay a huge ticket fee. So you just give away a ton of tickets, say, come watch wrestling. Everybody in Dallas knew about the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. Everybody knew about the Sportatorium. You get a free ticket. A lot of people are tempted to try it out. That's one of the reasons they had parking attendants that were really good, because of the neighborhood that we were in. They would protect the cars and make sure nothing would happen. That's why people didn't mind paying as much for parking as they did, because it was also for safety. But Gray figured out a different model, and the rest of the Dallas did not run on that model. Trying to sell house shows and spot shows and stuff like that. But the Sportatorium did.
One of the other things that they're going to make money with is photos with the baby faces, picture money, as Jeff Jarrett would call it. They're going to start doing those in the lobby of the Sportatorium for $5 a pop. They're going to kick in $1 to the promotion for every photo taken, but it is a way for the talent to make a little more money. One of the things they try, and it doesn't last very long, but John Tatum got to be the booker for a bit. He had some pretty crazy out there ideas, but it seemed to be working. One of the things he did is he hired an actor, maybe that was inspired by the Jameson character that we saw on the WWF, to just be around and associated with the product. Did you spend any time sort of listening to John Tatum's ideas, or do you have any relationship with John Tatum you can share with us?
No, thank goodness I wasn't there for John Tatum's run. I was there. I came there right afterwards, and so I missed Tatum's run. The only guy who really drew there was Eric Embry and Al Perez. After the Von Erichs and the Freebirds had left, they came back during this time, and Eric Embry did a really good job. Al Perez as the champion drew good crowds, good money. But after that, it was just dead. And there wasn't really anybody who drew anything until Gray Pearson, and Gray Pearson figured out the model to make it work. Tatum, I worked with John a lot. Hollywood was, he's the one that got Michael Hayes in the business, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, in Pensacola.
Yeah.
Michael was the hookup for weed for the boys at age 15 years old. So I know you can believe that. And Tatum's dad owned the Pensacola ground. He and Michael are pretty good friends. And John was a really good worker. Man, John could get heat. I mean, really, really good heat. I was surprised that John never made it anywhere else. Because he was a guy I thought could have done really well, in WWE or WCW. But you got to understand also, at that time, Texas was as big as anywhere. I don't think people knew what guys were making up in New York, as they called it, WWE. But, guys were making big money, and they were huge stars. I mean, there were all kinds of perks and benefits. Steve Simpson, he would have been a huge star in WWE. And, he stayed because of Fritz, but when you're that big a star, it's kind of like Tommy Wildfire Rich or the Rock and Roll Boys. There's no reason to go anywhere else. And Tatum was like that. Tatum was one of these guys that was a big star in Dallas.
I do want to ask you, it's hard to sort of even get in the mindset of what the business was like back then, because it is a time for transition. Like, the heyday of the 80s is over. We're not really playing to sold out arenas in the WWF or WCW. I mean, was your timing off? I mean, did you think there was an upside? I mean, at this point, it definitely feels like you're coming into an industry on the downswing. Did you know that at the time?
Absolutely. It was Conrad, it was the shits. I mean, it was terrible, and when I got cut from the World Football League, thank goodness the two things I had done, I'm 15 hours short of a college degree, because I had to leave early, because back then when you got picked up by a pro team, the first training camp or whatever they were, the non-voluntary camps that you better show up to was before finals. So I dropped out of school. So I'm about 15 hours short, but I coached one year at Trinity Valley Community College with Carl Andrus, who was a terrific coach, great guy. And it's where John Randall went to went to community college, junior college back then they called it, and Nick Van Exel went there. Sean Kemp was there for a short time. A great little college there in Athens, Texas. But, I was like a graduate assistant because I didn't have a college degree. So then I played pro football. I've coached without a degree. I played pro football. I'm not qualified to do much of anything in the world. And so I went to the unemployment office, and the guy just kind of laughed. He goes, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a wrestler." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do to be a wrestler?" I said, "I'm going up to Minnesota." I told him all about Brad Ryan's, what I'm going to do to train. And he said, "Okay, that's great." He goes, "Well, here's what it is. You're going to get $220 a week." And he says, "You got to check in with me." He said, "You can't take a job that you're not qualified for." He said, "You're qualified to be a coach without a degree or a pro football player." He said, "So you don't have to worry about having to take a job." So I got $220 a week, I think it was, for almost 6 months. That's how I made a living. And not made a living, but that's how I paid my bills. So I was getting, a little bit of money from wrestling, but I'm sitting there thinking, man, I've missed the heyday. I missed the Von Erichs. I missed the Freebirds. I missed Al Perez and Eric Embry. I missed WrestleMania era. I missed Hogan. I've missed everything. And I'm beginning to think, this may have been a terrible career decision. It's what I wanted to do, but I really thought I'd missed the boat on this.
The timing is everything, man, and it's awfully important. But we're going to hear that, you wind up making your debut in a major angle, saving the big baby face. It's going to happen in early October 1992. But let's first talk about how you landed on the name John Hawk. I've never asked you this, but about 5 years prior to this, Sylvester Stallone played a character, Lincoln Hawk, in the movie Over the Top. Was it inspired by that, or where do you land on John Hawk?
No, it was inspired by Killer Tim Brooks. I walk into a Villa Inn, and Killer says, "What's your name?" I said, "John Layfield." And of course, I know exactly who Killer is because I'm a wrestling fan. And Killer was a really nice man. That guy was double tough, as we always said. He was a tough man, but a good man, a really good guy. And I rode with Killer a lot in Texas. But there was a guy there that had been a wrestler, started to wrestle. And again, it was the only time I ever saw him. I never saw him again. And I believe his name was Bishop Hawk, I believe was the name he wrestled under. He said, "Well, you look like his cousin." He goes, "I'm going to name you John Hawk." I said, "Okay, fine." I didn't care. Well, I saw on Cage Match because I was trying to look up my first match. My first match was with Rod Price because I told you. Well, I didn't tell you. Lou Perez, who was Al Perez's working cousin, I believe, not brother, cousin, had no-showed the event due to travel problems. He didn't no-show because he's, didn't show, travel problems. They put me in the match with Rod, my very first match. I'm in there with the champion. And so I tried to find it on Cage Match, and 2 weeks before my first match that I saw with Black Bart, which was definitely not my first match, there was a John Bishop that wrestled Rod Price. So I think they conflated the two and made me John, not John Hawk, not Bishop Hawk, John Bishop, because I never heard of a guy named John Bishop. I'm sure that was me, and I'm sure that was my debut.
So when you have your first match like this, your first match ever is going to be for the Global Championship and
Yeah.
Rod Price. I'm not trying to be funny. I know in this era, we all called it in the ring. That was the way business was done. These days, we know there is more of a conversation, more of a plan going into the match. But for your first match, do you have a plan, or are you still?
No, and it wouldn't have done any good. I didn't know what a drop down or suplex. I didn't know any of that stuff. I knew how to do the moves. I didn't know what they're called. I mean, I didn't know any. We were not smartened up back then to stuff like that. You figured it all out in the ring. And so Rod was the perfect guy. Rod Price was a great worker, by the way. Rod was the guy we always thought would go to WCW or WWE. He had a great body, could talk, could really work. And so when they got him down there, I heard him talk to him. They said, "Hey, if he can go, take him as long as you can, 15, 20 minutes. If he can't, just go 2 minutes and squash him." And Rod was such a good dude. He could have squashed me, and no one would have been mad at him. I'm down there just to get a job. I have no idea what kind of job. I have no idea what a wrestling job is. And all of a sudden, I'm in there with the champion in the main event, my first match. And Rod, just like an old pro, took me 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was. Took me a long time out there. Just called everything to me, nice and calm. James Beard was out there with me, talking to me the whole time. I mean, they got me through. It was absolutely remarkable what Rod did. And I was well trained, but I didn't know anything about matches or how to put stuff together or heat or anything else. Rod just sit there and talk to me the whole time. I mean, a true old pro taking care of a young kid.
All I've ever heard is complimentary things about Rod Price. I know we had a cup of coffee with ECW, but he never really did have a major run with WWF or WCW. Why do you think that is?
Don't know. Rod's the one guy we all thought would make it. We were convinced. Now, we all knew that Booker T and Stevie would make it. There was not a doubt in anybody's mind, I don't think. Rod was the other guy that we thought would make it, big, in WCW or WWE, WWF at the time. I got him the job in Europe with Otto. He was there a full season, did a great job. Guys liked him. He good worker. I figured he would go on and, like I was going to do, and go to WWE or WCW. And for some reason he didn't. And it's inexplicable to me. He had the talent. He had the look. He had the intelligence. He had everything that you think, and he had a great career. For some reason, though, he didn't make it to WCW and WWE. And I think that's the one thing in Texas that people would say, who's the one guy that you thought would make it big and didn't? And Rod Price. I think everybody would list Rod as the number one because he had absolutely everything. He was great in Japan. He was really over. I mean, Rod was a really good worker. And inexplicable to me why he didn't get a 10, 15-year run in WCW or something.
So this is going to be your first match. It's also going to be on television. Not to be that guy, but I got to ask, are you inviting family to the match? Or are you telling them to at least watch you on TV? Or are you trying to keep this a secret because you don't know how this is going to go yet?
No, I got home at, oh my God, I was living at home, because I didn't have any place to live. And I got home at, oh my God, late in the morning. And plus Manny Fernandez and Butch Reed took me out afterwards, which was wilder than anything else. And so my dad asked me next day, he goes, well, what happened? And I said, I wrestled in the main event. He goes, you're kidding me. I said, no, but I never invited, family or anybody to the matches. I mean, our college roommates were huge supporters. John Busing, who was a state trooper for many years, came to a lot of my matches. He came to the famous the loser leaves town match with the Freebirds. So, but I had a lot of support from my college roommates and stuff. But my family didn't come much. My sister did, but that's about it.
Well, I know a lot of us were plopping down, firing up ESPN, grabbing a big bowl of cereal and enjoying a little wrestling. But then when we grow up, we realize maybe I don't need all that sugar. I need some protein. I need Magic Spoon. And I got great news for you, man. Every serving of Magic Spoon cereal has 13 grams of protein, but 0 grams of sugar and only 4 grams of net carbs. So you can feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, but there's so many more. And Magic Spoon's brand new treats are crispy, crunchy, airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. And now for the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores. And they've got delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. But man, I highly recommend you try, just my personal preference, double chocolate. Man, there's nothing like it. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/wrestle, or just look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/wrestle for $5 off. Magic Spoon. Hold on to the dream. So listen, let's talk about it, man. You have your first match, and it's for the title. It's on TV, and afterwards you go out drinking. Tell me about that first day, your first in-ring experience. Are you nervous going to the ring? Are you thankful when it's over? Are you relieved? Do you feel accomplished? Just talk me through it.
I was relieved after. I didn't know anything to expect. I didn't even know enough to be nervous. I knew I was out there with an old pro. Rod talked to me, and he was very confident of what he could do. And that exuded, that confidence exuded from Rod so much that it made me feel better. He knew he had a young kid that had no idea what he was doing, and Rod and I, later and still became pretty good friends. But I wasn't that nervous. I'd had a ton of matches with Brad. So I knew all the moves. But, getting out there in front of the crowd, it was like a new world to me. Rod was calling stuff and calling all these different things. It was really cool being out there and seeing how the whole inner thing works. I remember being in a match one time and somebody said, hit the tizag. And that was the first time I realized what carny was. That's how we learned back then. You didn't learn by people saying, okay, now here's what the vernacular is. Here's what this means. Here's what carny is. You had to learn by picking it up.
We got to, I really can't overstate how big a deal this was. This is wrestling on ESPN. Now, no, ESPN is not what it was. Like ESPN back then was just looking for content. It's not necessarily the multi-billion-dollar juggernaut that it is today, but still it was a big opportunity, and it's cable television. And I guess what I'm looking for here, John, is when you make appearances and so forth, do you hear from fans ever? Hey, I remember seeing you on Global back in the day.
Yeah, I do. But back then there wasn't, great stuff on television during the day, great sports stuff. Nowadays you got a million different things. You can pick up soccer in Europe. You got a million different things going on that you can pick up on television. Back then there wasn't. They had wrestling and that was it. So a lot of people watch this. So I still hear people from, hey, I've watched you at Global. I watched you with this. And I watched you with the Awesome Kongs. I watched you with Scott Putke. It's so cool to hear people be able to say that. Again, a lot of people thought we were making money. We weren't making any money. But when you talk about the opportunity, Conrad, I go from wrestling school. And by the way, I called Brad that day, Brad Reingens. And I said, Brad, I just got a job. He goes, congratulations. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in Texas. And he goes, oh, good. You at Sportatorium? I said, yeah. And I said, I'm here with Akbar and Bart. And he goes, oh, man, tell Bart. I said, hi. It's okay. And he goes, what are you doing? I said, they've stuck me in the main event. And he said, what? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm in the main event with Rod Price, with champion. He goes, you didn't tell him you could work, did you? And because he's worried about his name now. Like he trained me. He's like, if I screw up, I've sunk him, which I don't blame him. And I said, no, I told him I never had a match before. He goes, John, tell them you don't know how to work. I said, Brad, I told them all this. They're stuck because they need somebody. They stuck me in this thing as this old Texas boy. And he goes, oh, my God. He just laughed. He thought it was great. But, I got booked to go to Japan right after that because off that main event with Rod. Because Kendall Nagasaki, Mr. Sakurada, saw me. Okay. He didn't know I couldn't work. He just knows I'm a former pro football player, trained by Brad Reingens, and I'm in the main event at Sportatorium. He thinks, this kid's the next big thing. He books me in Japan. I'm tagging with Bob Orton Jr. within a few months.
My God.
The trajectory I had, it's not like, say, a Luger or an Angle, that just they guys, started in big federations and started on top. It wasn't like that, but I just got lucky. And then we go down to Laredo, and Kerry Von Erich was headlining a show down there. That's where Mexico saw me. They bring me down there and make me the champion against Vampiro. That was all my first year of wrestling. I had a crazy run of incredible luck in the wrestling business, but a lot of it also had to do with being trained by Brad.
Well, very early on in your global run, I think Black Bart and Johnny Mantell are going to be hanging you when all of a sudden Bobby Dunham's son, who's been a local star forever, Bobby Dunham, Bobby Dunham's son, Bobby Dunham Jr., is going to make the save. So now you find yourself paired with the son of a legend. That's a great association for a young guy in the business, is it not?
Oh, my God, I love Bobby. And Bobby Sr. was not just a local star. Bobby Sr. broke San Martino's arm, legitimately, not a work. He broke his arm because San Martino told me, he goes, you Texans, I hate you guys. He goes, freaking Hanson broke my neck and Duncan broke my arm. And but Duncan was a big name. He was a really good worker. He was a huge man, big, tough guy. Later, he was the Mummy, by the way. And Bobby, I got along with Bobby immediately. Bobby was a 4-year starter at University of Texas. Unfortunately, it was the 4 years that they lost to Oklahoma. And we were on a trip in Japan and Korea, and Booker T reminded Bobby so much of that Bobby told him to pull the bus over. He's going to fight Booker T. And so I said, Bobby, he's just stirring you up. And he had called Booker a cheerleader because Booker was a drum major in the band. He goes, well, you're a cheerleader. Well, you lost 4 years to Oklahoma, which was true. It made Bobby so mad. He goes, I wish I had my pads. And Brooke goes, "Oh, you need your pads for your fight. Oh, big tough." And now Bobby's furious. And so this goes on for like 2 weeks. It was, and by the way, Bobby loved Booker. It was, everybody does. But Bobby was terrific, man. Bobby and Kerry were real good friends. Bobby was loaded with charisma. Bobby was a terrific athlete. Started 4 years at University of Texas. And we were probably going somewhere, but his dad wanted him to try football again. And that's when Bobby went back to play some arena football and got hurt again. And, that was kind of the end of everything athletically. Now he ended up tagging with Stan, but that was certainly the end of his football. But Bobby and I we were starting to get over, and we knew we had a trajectory. We were going to be somewhere pretty quick. Now I'm kind of glad we didn't, because I don't think I was ready. I don't know if Bobby was or not, but I certainly wasn't ready at that time to go somewhere big. And we would have been somewhere big within 6 months if we'd have stayed together.
You're brand new to the wrestling business, but you've watched wrestling on TV before. So I think it's a natural question to ask. Were you sort of starstruck by anybody at any point? I mean, was it sort of an out of this world experience to realize I'm in the locker room and I'm a part of this, and there's that guy? Who was that guy? Or did that never happen for you?
Yeah, Kevin Von Erich. And I regret it to this day. Not that I worked with Kevin, but the first match I had with Kevin was for the NWA North American title, and they were putting the title on me. And I remember sitting out there and thinking, man, I grew up watching this guy, and we didn't have a good match, and it wasn't because of Kevin. Kevin's a good worker. It's because of me. I was overwhelmed by the situation. After that, we worked a bunch of times together. And Akbar had a long talk with me about Kevin. And, Kevin didn't mind. You could hit Kevin with a brick. He didn't care. He loved it stiff. He hit you stiff. He wanted it back stiff. I mean, Kevin was a tough guy. And after that, we had some really good matches together. But that first match, I don't know if it was bad, but it could have been a lot better. And the reason was I was overwhelmed by that. And that being said, that really helped me later in wrestling, because I swore I would never be overwhelmed again. And I really wasn't. I had able to, headline WrestleMania. I was able to wrestle, headline, according to the internet, which has to be right, a couple dozen pay-per-views. And I never got overwhelmed after that. But that first time I did. It really helped me long term, but I felt bad because that's one of my idols. And Kevin was so nice to me. When I got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, Kevin called Michael and said he'd be willing to induct me. I mean, that's how close Kevin and I were. I loved Kevin. Kevin was such a nice guy. The Von Erich boys, the only ones I knew were Kerry and Kevin. And I got to work either tag with or against or wrestle against in singles, both those two, several times. They were fantastic guys. I don't know anybody who would say anything bad about the Von Erich boys. And the only ones, again, I knew that were Kerry and Kevin. They were just fantastic guys. Kerry, by the way, you mentioned The Rock earlier. He was the only guy that I know that carried himself like The Rock. And I don't think The Rock does it on purpose. I think that's just God's gift to The Rock. That was God's gift to Kerry Von Erich. He would go through the airport. People would melt when they saw him. I mean, he's like traveling there's Kerry when me and Bobby won the titles. He was presenting them to us. And Kerry would sit there and just real humbly introduce himself. He goes, hi, I'm Kerry Von Erich. And, man, people would just melt. It was unbelievable, the charisma he had. We always heard that Vince wanted to run Texas. And the only way that he knew that he could do it for sure was to get Kerry. Okay. And I assume all of that's true, because you needed Kerry Von Erich to run Texas.
So, listen, you were saying a minute ago you were overwhelmed. Said differently, are you saying you had anxiety? Or what do you mean when you say you were overwhelmed?
I just remember sitting there across from him thinking I should be asking his autograph. And I remember thinking I don't belong here. And I don't know if that's anxiety or not. I don't know how to classify it, from a psychological term. I don't know what that was. I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, I remember when he debuted, and I'm sitting there on my grandfather's couch watching him. And now I'm sitting there across from him, and I was thinking, I should get an autograph with him. I should get a picture. Then I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm in a match, and I'm going over.
Right.
Thanks to his graciousness. Obviously it's a work. I don't know how to classify that. I just remember sitting there thinking, I don't deserve to be here.
I got you.
I'm not sure I should be here. And the whole match, I'm doubting myself because I'm out there with this legend. And I know that I'm not very good. I know that. I know he is. And that just gave me, I don't know what it was. Maybe doubt was the best word.
Maybe you needed a little more confidence. Maybe you needed some Blue Chew. Have some better sex with Blue Chew. Don't get overwhelmed by the cooter. Blue Chew is the original brand offering chewable tablets. These erection enhancing tablets help men achieve stronger, harder, and longer lasting erections for sexual activities. Blue Chew is putting its money where its mouth is, and it's offering you a month free. And the process is simple. You sign up at bluechew.com. You consult with one of their licensed medical providers. And once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, and you can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the best part is it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. So make your life easier by getting harder and discover your options at bluechew.com. I'm telling you, you get that Blue Chew in you and, you got 2 out of 3 falls. All those ladies are going to start acting like Kerry Von Erich's. They're just going to start melting. We got a special deal for our listeners. Try your first month of Blue Chew free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Hey, so let's talk about some other folks sort of behind the scenes in Global. I want to pick your brain about. It's written here that Chris Love is out as booker and Eric Embry is going to be trying to take over some of the booking. Do you remember Chris Love, and what was your experience like with Eric Embry?
I met Eric years later. I met him about 3 years ago. And so I don't remember when Eric came back there. I had to come just after Eric because I got to meet him at a event, a Texas Roundup, they call it, that was up in Dallas, a bunch of old wrestlers, and Eric flew in, which I was so happy. I spent several hours talking to Eric. Jerry and I have had him on our show. Terrific guy. I love Eric. Such a nice guy, real smart guy. But I never got to work with him. He was a great booker. He's one of the ones that kind of rejuvenated wrestling. Now, Al Perez certainly helped us being the champion, but he's the one that really rejuvenated Texas wrestling. I wish I would have got to meet him, but I did not get to work with Eric. Agbar was the booker and pretty much the main and only booker. Now, Maniac Mike Davis also helped Ack book at the time, which nobody's ever kind of put that in there, but Mike was a big help to Ack.
Talk to me a little bit about the crowds, because it's written about in the Observer that there are some shows that Chris Love booked where there were only 66 paid fans. I know this is humble beginnings for Global and you're just cutting your teeth, but talk to me a little bit about, the dwindling crowd sizes, if you will.
They weren't dwindling. Right after that was when Gray Pearson decided he's just going to paper the whole building. And because he got money off parking and concessions. And so we had full crowds. I mean, we would have sellouts basically at the Sportatorium. And you tell people that and go, oh, nobody, you don't have to sell at Sportatorium. Yeah, we did. Nobody bought a ticket. I mean, nobody. I mean, you would go up there even to the ticket window and there'd be people outside go, hey, just go in for free. And they'd hand you tickets. So nobody cared about the paid admission. You got parking, you got concessions, and you had this great crowd for TV. Now Vince, always had a different perspective than this. When we were fighting with WCW and our crowds were bad, Vince would not paper an arena. Now you paper enough, for promotion and stuff like that, several hundred, maybe even a few thousand tickets, but Vince would not paper an arena because Vince's viewpoint was people are different when they buy a ticket. They're different fans. They're more invested. I get all that. Dallas was such a mess, though. There wasn't really much Gray Pearson could do. And so he just papered the whole arena. And so we had huge crowds. I mean, we're sitting there, you're sitting there in front of, I don't know what the Sportatorium had. I saw one 5,000. I don't think it was even close to that. I think it was more like 2,500 because you had 3 sides. It famously had burned part of it down. That was a rotten old building. Great building, but rotten old building. But we'd have, 2,500 people in the building and we're on ESPN. People thought, man, you must be making money. We weren't making nothing, but it was a great atmosphere.
One of the things that all promoters try to do is they have some crazy out there ideas they're trying to promote. So one of the ideas that they're doing here in Global is Hey, we're gonna have Dallas Cowboys night, but we're not actually gonna have any Dallas Cowboys there. So they're doing these silly promotions. But another thing that happened in the South a lot, I talked to Tracy Smothers about this. My man wrestled multiple bears. Do you remember there ever being discussion about a spectacle like that, John, where they may have had a guy wrestle a bear?
No, I don't. But there was Bart wrestled a bear famously and quit over it down in, I think, in Mississippi or somewhere. Wherever it was, Bart used to tell the whole story a million times. I wrestled a bear in college. And
wait, hang on. We're talking about pro wrestling, but you're doing pro wrestling after college.
Right.
How would you wrestle a bear in college if you're not a wrestler yet, John?
So this is, I think, a good story. You'll be the judge if it's a good story. I love when guys used to go up to Vince go, got a great idea for you, Vince. Go, I will be the judge of that. So you be the judge. This is a good story. But I was in college and I went to Abilene Christian, which I love, by the way. Great school, and I had wonderful friends. To this day, I text these guys, those inappropriate texts that everybody has. I still got one of those, bunch of my old college buddies from Abilene Christian, and I love those guys, Steve and John and all those guys. And Steve and John, my two college roommates, had come back my senior year and my junior year, and I had gone out with them. Well, when I went to Abilene Christian, you couldn't drink. The drinking age was 19 when I was 19. Then it went up to 21, but I was over 21 at the time. So I went out with them, had a few drinks. I came back in and got busted. And so the athletic director, who, hated me. I can't tell you how much that man disliked me. And I can't tell you how much I disliked that man too. Couldn't stand him. He busted me. And so I'm in trouble. And, I told the truth. Yeah, I was out. They threw the book at me. Well, then we had a bad year. And so they had this bull in the ring, where you just go out there and you first match, put gloves on, beat people up, and throw them out. So some of the freshmen said, how do you think you'd do against a bear? I go, I'd kill a bear. I'm young and, big and strong, I'm thinking, bravado. Well, a few weeks later, they go, hey, the bear's here. I said, what bear? They go, you said you'd wrestle a bear. There was a wrestling bear at Butterfield Junction, a cowboy bar across town in Abilene. I'm signed up to wrestle this damn bear. So this local All-American's going to wrestle this bear. So my college roommates go out there with me. John Busey, he wrestled the bear too. And I wrestled this bear, and this damn thing beats me half to freaking death. Thank God it wasn't brown bear mating season, because something bad would have happened. But I thought it's like a 300-pound bear. It was like an 800, there it is right there. It was an 850-pound bear. That's when the bear lost it on me, and he's biting me there, but his front teeth weren't in, so he's just gnawing me. I've got a scar on my hand that the bear had bitten my hand right here, and blood's coming down. It was a disaster. That bear annihilated me. It was like National Geographic. At one point, I got the bear, and the bear was like wrestling as hard as I was. Now I got $1,500 if I got that bear on its back, and to a college kid in 1988. Yeah, that's the equivalent of about $4 billion. So I'm sitting there thinking, if I can get this damn bear on its back, I got $1,500. So I'm sitting there. The place is packed. The bear's wrestling as much as I am. So I thought, you know what? I'll just relax. I relax. The bear relax. I relax more. The bear relax more. And I was just kind of like dancing. When he did, I grabbed him and I threw him, and I got him on his side, but I didn't get him on his back. When I got him on his side, that thing went National Geographic on me. The only way I can say it is that bear exploded. Exploded. It just roared. I'm like, oh my God. So it knocked me across the dance floor because there's a little rug on the dance floor. We're wrestling on a wooden floor. This bear's beat me to death. And it throws me underneath the table. Here comes this bear galloping across. This is like something out of freaking like a zoo. This is like when animals attack. And this damn bear just freaking annihilated me. Annihilated me. So I come in the next morning. I'm so sore and beat up. I can't even hardly walk. And the head coach, John Payne, who's a good friend of mine, Bob Shipley, by the way, shout out to my dear friend. His son, Jackson Shipley, was the great receiver at University of Texas. He's my line coach, but Coach Payne calls me in, and he's the head coach. Good man. And he said, John, did you wrestle a bear last night?
Oh, my God.
And I said, you know how stupid that sounds? He goes, you did, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did. He goes, was it in a bar? And I go, Yeah, I was in Butterfield Junction. He goes, my God, John. He goes, you're on probation. He goes, they're going to kick you out of school. And I said, what do I do? He goes, the athletic director wants to see you, and he wants to kick you out of school. And I said, oh, shit. I said, he goes, if you got a plausible explanation. I said, yeah, I've always told the truth. I said, I'm just going to lie. And he goes, do you have a good one? And I said, yeah, I'm just going to tell him I didn't do it. And I said, there's no pictures. There's no nothing. This is before cell phones. I said, there's no way you can prove this. So I walk into his office, this guy, and he is confident and cocky. And I hated this man. He hated me too. And, you know, so it was even. He goes, heard some crazy things about you since you've been here. And I said, yes, sir. I said, most are true. And he goes, did you wrestle a bear last night? I said, what is this, National Geographic? I said, you know how stupid that sounds, that I would wrestle a bear on a Thursday night? And he said, so your answer is no. And now I realize he's got something. I know he's got something. I'm like, oh my God, he's got me. He's got me. And I just looked at him. I thought, oh, I got to double down. I got to double down. If I say yes, they're going to throw the book at me. They always told me if you tell the truth, we're not going to throw the book at you. They lied. They'd throw the book at me every time I told the truth. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to flat lie. And I said, no. He said, so you're saying you didn't wrestle a bear? I said, correct. And somebody had been to a 1 hour photo and had left the photos. That photo that Dave just put up, the stud muffin, had left that photo in the locker room. And he had it. There's actually was 4 photos. I've only got 2 surviving that have been around. One other one's not that great. And he threw these photos out there. And I said, oh, you said bear. You said bear. And I said, oh, yeah, I wrestled a bear last night. I said, but I can't go to a place where you can drink or dance. That was in the school rules. ASU was very strict at the time. And I said, but I went there to wrestle a bear. I said, that's not covered in the rules. So now he tells them basically they're going to throw me out of school. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I go into, everybody now is taking shots at me, you know, because I was wild. I was typical college guy, you know, that just, I didn't belong in college. I belonged somewhere else. So the dorm director was also a dick. And he called me in and he was trying to read me the riot act, you know, because now I've got no power. Like he's sitting there. And as I'm sitting there, he's got a gun on his desk. It's not pointed at me, not nothing. I think he had it there to kind of, you know, show he's tough, you know, but he never threatened me. Not one time. Not, you know, back then, now it's a felony, I think, to have a gun in a college campus. Back then it was just Texas. You know, people had guns everywhere. You know, I remember guys, my college roommate had a shotgun in the dorm because we'd go hunting, you know, and or go shoot road signs at least. So I'm sitting there and I said, you just pulled a gun on me in a disciplinary session. And he looked at it, he goes, no, I didn't. He didn't. I'm lying. It's the only way I'm going to stay in school. So I went and called my dad and told him they put a gun on me. And I remember about a week later, when the defensive coordinator goes, you got to stop this stuff with this gun. He didn't pull a gun on you. I'm like, it's the only way I'm staying in school, pal. I'm riding this all the way. And sure enough, they decided to take my scholarship from me, but let me stay in school. So I made All-American as a junior, second team All-American. I made first team All-Conference. I had to walk on as a senior. Literally, I had to pay for school as a senior, and I'm one of the first returning All-Americans they'd had in 30 years. So I was a very bitter, angry person in college.
You that Dos Equis guy ain't got shit on you. You are the most interesting man in the world. I mean, your life, I mean, somebody suggested this on Twitter, and I totally agree. Your life is a sitcom. Like, Young Rock was a piece of shit show compared to your real life. I mean, this is make believe. Like,
I just didn't have any filters. I didn't have a stop sign. You know, nothing. Cause and effect didn't bother me, you know, which sounds great. You know, people say, oh, I don't care. It sounds great, but when you really don't, it's like you get yourself into a lot of binds and into a lot of trouble over the years because I just didn't give a shit. You know, I wanted to enjoy life and fun. And that's not always good when you don't worry about the consequences.
Tell me a little bit about, how you were able to move around in this era. I think I've heard through the grapevine that you somehow knew something about the travel industry and that made it more affordable. Tell me about that.
Oh, this was the best deal I ever did. My dad told me I should take my $5,000 and throw it out the window. He says, dumbest investment I've ever heard of. But I knew what I was going to get out of it. So my good friend, Derek Collins, was a chiropractor in Athens, Texas, and he loved to travel. Well, back then, you got incredible benefits by being a travel agent. So Derek wanted to start up this travel agency. We were buddies. So he said, hey, why don't you give me $5,000 and I'll put it in this travel agency. You're going to get all kinds of benefits out of this. I said, okay. So, I played my first season of World League. And I had a little bit of money, not a lot, but I gave him the $5,000. Best investment I ever made. So when I was training up in Minnesota, I could fly, I think it wasn't JetBlue. It was, I can't think of the airline. It was like a JetBlue type airline. I could fly space available all I wanted up to Minneapolis. So I could fly home. I could fly all over the world. When I lived in Europe and worked for Otto, I got first class train tickets. So I would take the train all over Europe. I mean, I went everywhere because I had this travel IATA card, I think it was at the time. I went to Hawaii and on it one year. I went to Cayman Islands where I met Oliver Humperdinck and a bunch of the boys. But when I was in Europe, I would get these train tickets and travel all over Europe and just do things. But all because of this travel agent benefit. That I was legitimately a travel agent owner, even though Derek ran it and Derek, paid all the bills and stuff. But Derek, because of my friendship, put me on the roll. And because of this, I got all these benefits. And man, I traveled the world, first class, everywhere, because I had this silly little travel agent card. And in fact, I was going to Russia when I was in Europe. I had like several days to get up there. I had my Russia visa and everything. And I was on the train, first class, of course, because I had I think it's an IATA card. I think is what it was. And we had a train wreck, and I got stuck in the middle of Sweden. So I never made it to Russia. But I ended up getting a train back and going space available to go back.
Hey, talk to me a little bit about some of the names that you're sharing a locker room with. I think Manny Fernandez would have been here when you're here. It feels like everybody's got a crazy Manny Fernandez story. Do you?
Oh, my God. Of course I do. Yeah. Manny threw a guy through a window at our favorite bar. Threw him through a window. Could have killed him. Manny loved to fight. Manny could fight. He was very good at it. Manny was a very tough guy. Loved to fight. Manny could work, man. He hit you that flying burrito, he called it. Man, it looked like it killed you, and it was the lightest thing there was. I mean, Manny was a terrific worker. But Manny, you get a little alcohol in Manny, and he was different level. But he threw a guy through a window one night in our local bar. Manny was a good guy. Manny helped book some. Manny really helped me a lot in the ring. I mean, Manny was always very, very good to me.
Let's talk about some other names. There's a fellow there named Metal Maniac. You got any Metal Maniac stories you can share?
Somebody asked me if this was true about a year ago. I can't remember who asked me this. If he got in line and got a picture with Kerry Von Erich in full gimmick. So he came down, and I didn't know him. He had the whole gimmick on. It's like an Ultimate Warrior kind of ripoff, I guess. I don't know. I didn't know him, and I don't know him to this day. But he had his whole gimmick on. He walks out of the dressing room and goes out where Kerry is selling Polaroids, gets in line in his full gimmick. He's wrestling on the card and gets in line and takes a picture with Kerry and pays for it.
My God.
Yeah, I don't remember how much longer he was there, but after word got around about that, it wasn't much longer. You got to understand, like any territory, we had some old guys that were really good guys. We had some young guys, and I'm not saying Maniac's an idiot. I have no idea. Don't know him. We had some real idiots, and we had some pretty good promising guys.
What about Scott Putski? Did you run into Scott Putski when you were
there? I knew Scott very well. Scott had a terrific body. And I always thought Scott would make it. He had a great body. Of course, you can't replicate that name. I always thought he'd make it WCW or WWE. I always thought he would do really well. For whatever reason, I think he made it for a little while, but never did have that big run like his dad had. I got to ride with Ivan one loop. Ivan was, I think, a school teacher in Austin, I think. But anyway, he came in because Scott was, trying to make it in the business. And Scott had a brother. I think he had a brother. Maybe his uncle. I can't remember. Trying to make it as well. But Scott had great talent. I mean, really good talent. And Scott looked fantastic. I mean, really freaking good. But riding with Ivan was so cool. I got to ride with Sputnik Monroe one time. I mean, it was really cool to have these old guys around, and Ivan was there mainly because of Scott, but I got the benefit of it and got to share a car with him on a couple towns.
Let's talk a little bit about Chris Adams. I mean, I think when people think about the Sportatorium, he's always on the short list. I know what a great performer he was, the innovator of the super kick, just a great mind for the business. But tell us about, outside of the ring, Chris Adams, because Bruce has told us some crazy stories. I guess this guy was a partier with a capital P. What was your experience like with Chris?
Yeah, my experience was very good. And that's, as Black Bart would say, all you can say is how they treated you. And Chris treated me incredibly well. So I've got nothing negative to say from a personal viewpoint. Chris had some demons, though. That man was wild. You give that man some firewater, as Mr. Briscoe would call it. And that man, they had to sneak him out of Israel because he super kicked some kind of bar. Chris was wild. I mean wild. He had a real dark side to him when he would drink. A lot of people do. But as far as being over, I mean, Chris was really over. Chris was a really good worker. I mean, a really good worker. I do know when he went and talked to Vince, Chris's selling point was, I can stretch probably 90% of your guys.
Wow.
Vince said, I don't care. Chris was I think a pretty tough guy. Knew his judo and all that stuff. Chris's problem was his own personal demons. I wasn't there the night that he pulled the weave mistakenly out of Rod Price's head. Rod had a weave in his hair. Rod now is clean shaven. And Chris, by mistake, they want to do a judo match. Rod didn't really want to do it. It wasn't a shoot. Chris, I don't think, did it on purpose. But he went to grab him and throw him, and he pulled the weave out of his hair. And Rod was so mad, he went across the street to, I think, get something to drink. There was that liquor store right across the street, and all of a sudden blood just comes pouring down him. I mean, Rod, man, it was, I don't know how many it was. It was tens of stitches that Rod had to have in his hair. And about, I don't know, a couple weeks later, they wrestled again, and Rod broke his arm.
Oh, wow.
And so.
Do you believe it was an accident? You don't think he was ribbing him. You think it was an accident?
I don't think it was. I mean, Rod thought it was either enough of an accident or that he owed him a receipt. And, a couple of weeks later, there was a broken arm. I don't know. I wasn't there for the broken arm either. I don't know how it happened. I know it did happen.
What's protocol in that when something like that happens amongst the boys? Is everybody supposed to just stay out of the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Shit's going to happen. And, you just, it's going to happen sooner or later anyway. And so,
what do you think pissed Rod off the most? I mean, was it that he was hurt, or was he embarrassed? Was he humiliated?
I think I've talked to Rod about it since, and he was on our show and talked about it in detail. And what made Rod the maddest was he did not want to do the judo match. Rod's not a judo guy. Chris is. He did not want to do the judo match and a gi and all that stuff. And Rod didn't like the whole setup of the thing. I don't think Rod thought it was on purpose. I don't know for sure. I've never asked him that question. But Rod did not want to do the judo match. I know that for sure. And Chris talked him into it. And then all of a sudden this crazy thing happens. And, Rod is beside himself. Chris tried to call him, and I don't know if he tried to make amends or not. I think Rod said it was okay, but, just because it's okay doesn't mean you don't give a receipt to somebody.
Well, let's keep a receipt for our favorite nutritional hookup. We're talking about Factor. If you're ready to optimize your nutrition this year, let me just put you up on game, as the kids are saying. Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. So you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws your way. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. You can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. This is based on randomized controlled clinical trials with Factor Keto Of course, your results will vary depending on your diet and exercise, but they've got over 40 options across 8 different dietary preferences on the menu each week. So it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart or Protein Plus or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab and go snacks, and all the add-ons. You can reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that truly can't be beat. And I'll be honest, here on Something to Wrestle, we've had a lot of these sponsors for meal delivery services. Factor is the only one that I keep ordering over and over again, not just when they're advertising, even when they're not. Factor is Megan tested, Megan approved. You're going to love it. Eat smart with Factor. Get tested or get started right now, rather, at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. When you use our code Factor Podcast, you'll get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. And you'll get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. I'm telling you, you've never had food like this. Heat and eat in 2 minutes. It doesn't get any better. It's Factor. Go try it for yourself. You'll be glad you did. Factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. Hey, so listen, we've got a few different stories that I want to hit here, but you sent me a note that says upstairs was the room. So, are we talking about upstairs at the Sportatorium, or is there a bar called Upstairs? What does that mean?
No, there was an upstairs club in Abilene, Texas. That was a bar, but this had nothing to do with the room at the Sportatorium. So there was upstairs, there was the room, and guys would disappear in there for a while, and they would not come out exactly the same. So I was never invited up there. I was never, did a lot of, I was a drinker, but that was about it. But yes, there was the room upstairs that guys would go in and they would come out a different person, you might say. There was a lot of drugs and alcohol back in the day, and guys fault a lot of that generation. We didn't know how bad stuff was for us. Guys didn't know how bad pain pills were. They didn't know they would kill so many people. Guys didn't know how bad, concussions were. So, guys did a lot of things that they thought they had a license to do, and they did. That were really bad for them that I don't think they knew how bad they were.
Listen, we know that America, just the world, has loosened up on marijuana. We also know that when marijuana wound up on the banned list for the WWF, and they started testing for that because it was an illegal narcotic, that maybe that boosted the reliance on prescription pills. But we know in 1980s, rock stars were doing cocaine, and a lot of pro wrestlers live that rock star lifestyle. What was the scene in Dallas? I know you didn't participate, but you certainly heard things, right?
Oh yeah. And I saw it. Yeah. I saw it. I wasn't up in the room, but I was, in a bar down in the border one time when some guys were doing a blow off of a bar, and the police called me. Not called me. They came up and got me and said, "Hey, are you with these guys?" And I said, "Yeah." "What's the problem?" They said, "They're doing blow off the freaking bar." And the police didn't want to arrest them. They were famous guys, And so I literally have to go down there and say, "Guys, you really can't do cocaine off the bar. That's really a bad idea." So it was everywhere. Nobody knew how bad it was, but that was the drug of choice, and as they say, never enjoyed cocaine, just enjoy the smell, as they would always say. But yeah, guys did all kinds of, crazy shit, and it wasn't, guys drank before matches. Guys would do that before matches. Now you see these guys, and God bless them. It's a different world. Comparing, there was a guy a friend that I knew down in Texas, and he wanted to get into wrestling. And so I set him up with, Albert, Matt Bloom, and it didn't work out. But anyway, his dad said, "Hey, there's too many drugs and stuff in wrestling." No. Comparing that era to today is like comparing North Dallas 40 to today's NFL. It's not even the same business that we're in. Nowadays it's all cleaned up. It should be, and I'm glad it is. But back then it was just a license to do whatever you wanted.
Hey, talk to me a little bit about, when you're in the promotion and you're sharing a locker room with these guys. We've talked about how business is down. It is down everywhere else. It's down in WCW. It's down in the WWF. But Bruce has told us, you know, it was common when you didn't work for the WWF, you just threw shade at it. So when he was in Paul Bosch's territory, or even when I talked to Mr. Crockett, you know, the narrative was always, oh, that's that phony stuff they do in New York. That's that showbiz stuff. We're real wrestling. Were there guys in the locker room who felt that way, where they were sort of disparaging WWE, but maybe the secret is they'd all love to take that WWE check?
Only about 100% of them.
Okay.
I mean, everybody in that locker room bashed WWE. Everybody in there would bash how fake and phony it was, how bad Vince McMahon was, how evil he was. They'd saw all kinds of bad things about Pat. I mean, they would just make up stuff to say about those guys. They act like they hated them. Every single one of them would have taken a job with WWE. When I got signed by WWE, I came back and I did a couple shows in Texas. And I remember the guys pulled me aside. Go, man, you're not going up there, are you? I said, damn right I am. And they said, this place is about to pop. We're going to make it big here. And you're going to go up there with Vince McMahon? And I said, guys, you want to pay my rent? Feel free, because I can't pay my rent here in Texas. I'm going up there for money, and you ain't going to see me again if that's your attitude. And they were all like, I can't believe you're a sellout. You're a sellout. No, I ain't a sellout. I'd do the same thing that every single one of you guys would have done if you were good enough to get a deal.
Wow. I think that's interesting. Do you think that narrative still exists? Like, I gotta assume it does. I mean, but it's almost talked about when fans talk about it now, John, like, oh, it's tribalism. But it sounds like on some level, tribalism existed even back then, just in the locker room.
Yeah, I think it did. There's no doubt it did. And guys did not want to – guys, man, they bashed New York like crazy. Everybody had something bad to say about them. I'd go to Japan, they'd bash New York. I'd go to Texas, they'd bash New York. I'd go to Europe, they'd bash New York. I'd go to Mexico, they'd bash New York. I'd go to Tennessee, they'd bash New York. It was like the evil giant that no one wanted to work for. But every person that I talked to would have answered the phone from Vince McMahon and gladly would have taken a job.
Did you know that back then, or are you so new in the business that it's sort of brainwashing you? Or do you know, hey, they're all talking shit, they'd all go take the check?
I thought they would, but I didn't know. And I didn't know Vince. I didn't know anybody up there in WWE. I didn't know anybody in the business. But I always assumed that's where I would end up. I really did. I thought I might go to WCW. I thought I'd go to WWE. You know, I really thought that was where I wanted to end up. Now, I never dreamed I'd be there for 30 years. I thought I'd be there for 2 or 3 years. Heels didn't hang around that long. And then I'd end up in Japan with Stan and the guys, and I'd finish over there. That was my goal, was to be in WWE for 2 or 3 years and then go to Japan, finish my career over there. Everything changed with the Monday Night Wars, and after the Montreal screw job, all of a sudden guaranteed contracts came into focus and long contracts. That was not around before, and the option wasn't there. Guys, heels didn't stay around that long. Heels came in, Duncombe, Stan, all these great heels would come in and leave and go somewhere else, take their name and go somewhere else. That's what I thought I would end up doing.
I want to ask you about a guy like Al Perez. I mean, I know you think a lot of Al. I certainly do. I mean, just an incredible performer. I've even joked on the show before that, you know, he's the long lost father of Seth Rollins. But Al Perez, man, you take a look at his career. Obviously, he's most famous for allegedly turning down the Black Scorpion opportunity with Sting. But he does have a cup of coffee with the WWF in 1989 and 1990. Only a couple of sporadic TV appearances, I think, against Terry Taylor. Why don't you think Al Perez ever hit on a national level? It feels like he would have checked a lot of boxes for Vince.
He had some fallout with Pat, and I don't know what it was over. I think it was a misunderstanding. I don't know. I'm not going to put words in Al's head or mouth or anything else. Al can speak for himself, and he certainly is a smart guy and can do that. He had some fallout with the guys, and I'm not sure what it was. And, you know, he had some fallout with Vince as well. And it just, you know, Al was a guy that he drew money in Texas. I mean, Al was a guy that you look at it, that guy was incredible, really good looking, great body, terrific worker. You know, Al's a guy that should have been around for another 20 years. And for whatever reason, he got a bad taste in his mouth when we went up to New York and quit the business. And, you know, when me and Jerry interviewed him a couple years ago or a year or two ago, I said, JBL, and you know, he had no idea who I was. Not that that's a big deal, not that I'm a big star, but
Yeah.
Al hasn't watched wrestling for years. You know, he just kind of got a bad taste in his mouth, went to work and did something else, and you know, finished out his career, you know, in the private sector, and has done really well. He's a smart guy, but he got a bad taste in his mouth about wrestling and got out of the business and did not look back.
I don't know. I just find that interesting that he was such a talented guy and everybody thought, man, he's surefire, and it just didn't work out. But one of the things that did work out is you wrestling border towns. That's something I didn't really think about. But if you're working in Texas, you are going to work border towns. When you do that, do you see a lot of lucha stars? Is that how you get exposure to lucha fans? Tell us about working a border town show, John.
Yeah, we worked all the border towns. There was a guy who ran a territory that was just a little bit south of San Antonio. He ran all the border towns, and that's one of my first $100 paydays, by the way. So I'd fly down there. You know, they'd fly us obviously Coach or Southwest Airlines, and then I would, you know, $100 payday, which is pretty cool because it's one of the first times I got $100. And Kerry, fortunately, had come back from WWE and was with us, so we were selling out all these border towns because of Kerry. And, you know, it was such a big deal. We were in, I believe, Laredo or Harlingen. I can't remember what town we were in. And that's where the Mexican group, CMLL, came over and saw me and wanted me to come down and be the fake vampire against Vampiro down there. I didn't, you know, obviously I didn't know the whole backstory, which you've gone into, but that's where I got the job to go down to Mexico. We didn't have a ton of luchadors on our show, but we did have, you know, obviously a massive Latino crowd. And we drew the interest because of Kerry, the Northern Wrestling Promotions in Mexico. I'll tell you a funny story. We were in, I think it was Laredo, we went to Nuevo Laredo, and we wanted to see the donkey show. So
Oh my God.
So we all go down to Nuevo Laredo because I've heard about this my whole life. You know, growing up in Texas, I got to see this. So we go down there and we're like in this really nasty bar. There was no donkey. There was no nothing. You know, it was nothing. It was just like a overpriced booze, even for Mexico. And Briscoe told me one time he went down there was a guy in a donkey suit. So I didn't get to see that either. So anyway, we're sitting there and all the boys are there and they're all posing for a picture. I said, "What are you guys doing?" They go, "Oh, it's like the National Enquirer or something." I said, "We're at a freaking donkey show. What are you thinking?" So I shut the camera down. I grabbed Kerry and I said, "Kerry, let's get out of here." He goes, "Where are we going?" I said, "We're going out the fire escape." So we went to a window and we're on the second floor. We went to the fire escape down and went back to the United States and never got to see any donkeys.
My God, what a life you've lived. Hey, did you, I think you've mentioned before on the show that you ran some shows with James Beard. What does that mean? Can you tell me?
Yeah, we ran shows. We ran, and they were very successful. I paid the boys well, paid them always $75 to $100 each. Paid a couple of them $150 for a main event. So I was the best pay guy there was. And we ran shows. Me and James, you know, booked them ourselves. We put up all the placards and stuff in all the store windows, got the local media and stuff. And we ran several shows. In fact, we were running, we're successful enough. We thought about doing it more, but I came to the point where I'd be the guy to decide, do I want to be a talent or do I want to be a promoter? And I thought I still got a chance to be a talent. And so we quit it because of that, not because of, you know, anything else but yeah, we ran a bunch of shows. So yeah, we promoted shows for everything. I mean, from the placards in the windows to the media, to booking the arena, to booking the talent, to booking everything. Yeah, we did it all ourselves. I'd been in the business, you know, about a year or two. Now James had been in the business a long time, smart guy, and we ran several shows.
I mean, was it a learning experience? Did it give you a new appreciation for being a promoter? Was it easier than you thought? I mean, what was your experience like?
It was easier than I thought. Yes, it was. You know, now we didn't have a bad show, so you know, maybe we got lucky. But yeah, it was easier than I thought. We made good money, and you know, more money than we made working. And so, yeah, it opened up my eyes to a lot of things. You know, opened up my eyes, you know, to payroll, to as far as the promotion, what we needed to do, how we needed to position this, and all that. Now, it was a bit of a tough time at the time because it was right when the business, it's been exposed since the beginning of the business, but everybody's trying to expose the business. So every interview you do is wrestling real? That's the first question. So you got to get around that and then talk about the show and who all's there and, the attractions and stuff. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a huge learning experience.
Did you, I know you promoted some shows earlier in your life like that. Is that something you ever gave thought to later in life? Did you ever have any ambition to run shows again?
100%. I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed paying the guys a good wage, and being a guy that, gave them a good payoff. And, I'd let them know how much I made. Nothing was hidden. And yeah. And James and I, at one point, literally we thought, if we could get a big sponsor, we could run, maybe as many as, 25 to 50 shows a year. And we could make pretty good money off this. But again, it was the choice I had at that point, between being talent and trying to make it in the business or being a promoter. I had to do one or the other, I thought. But it is something that I've always thought I would love to go back to. I've always enjoyed the promotion side. Always enjoyed talking to Vince about it. Mr. Crockett, Jimmy Crockett, was very nice to me when he came in. He would sit me down and would explain everything to me. Akbar would explain everything to me. Kendo Nagasaki, he'd come fishing with me down in East Texas. He would explain to me about the Japanese, the mafia, the Yakuza, how it worked with arenas and all that stuff. I always enjoyed the business side of it, and always thought I'd probably get into that side. I don't know if that will ever happen or not, but it is something that I enjoy.
I don't really mean to be Debbie Downer, but I'm just thinking about the timeline of when you were in Global. You technically would have been there when Kerry passed away, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Kerry and Bobby were really good friends. Bobby was the nicest guy, and Bobby was
Duncombe Jr. You're saying.
Bobby Duncombe Jr. I'm sorry, yeah, Bobby Duncombe Jr. Bobby and I were roommates. We were roommates in Garland, and Bobby was. Man, I love Bobby. I did the eulogy at his funeral when Bobby passed away, unfortunately. I wish Bobby was still around. Certain things you miss, guys like Bobby and Eddie, you wish were still around. But Bobby was such a nice guy, and Bobby had this innate charisma about him, but he was an incredible athlete. He and Kerry were really tight, and they went out a lot together, and they had a lot of fun together. Kerry was fun. He was a fun human being. So Kerry disappeared, and Bobby looked at me. We're roommates, and he goes, "Kerry shot himself in the chest." I said, "Why do you say that?" He goes, "Well, he told me a month ago that he would jokingly said, if I shoot myself, it'll be in the chest, not in the head. I want an open casket. I'm too vain." And he was just joking. But then Kerry got busted, I think, with a little bit of drugs or something. And I don't think Kerry was going to prison, but there was a chance he was. And Kerry was very big on public perception. Kerry thought he had let down his fans, and Kerry thought that, Kerry thought he might be going to prison, and he could have handled the prison time, but he couldn't handle letting down his fans. And so when Bobby knew he was gone, Bobby said he shot himself in the chest. And sure enough, they found him a day or two later, and he had shot himself in the chest.
My God, how sad.
Kevin, he called Kevin, and Kevin's told me the story. Kevin and I rode together. I've told you our friendship with Kevin. He called Kevin and said, "Hey, I just want to say goodbye." And Kevin's, tried to talk him out of it. He goes, "Wait till I get there." And Kevin told us, "Hey, when you die, this happens." He goes, "Well, I'll leave a note." They're just joking. The Von Erich boys, from my understanding, they believe life just kind of continued after death. That was not the end. That was the beginning. He thought he would see his brothers and, be someplace and things were going to be fun, and so it wasn't like he was just ending things. It was almost like he was going into a transition, and Kevin drove, 1,000 miles an hour trying to get to Kerry, but obviously he didn't make it in time.
My God, what a sad story.
Yeah, it was sad. That's why I never watched the movie The Von Erichs. I lived it.
You never saw it?
Never saw it. I've seen it. I was there. I lived the whole thing. And not that I'm against the whole thing. I know some friends that were in it, and James Beard was in it, but I don't have a desire to see it. I lived it.
They had a memorial show for Kerry, didn't they?
Yeah, sure did. That Friday night. I've talked to a lot of people who said they were supposed to be on that memorial show. Apparently there's about 1,000 people that were booked on that show, from all the people that said they were on the show or supposed to be there, which, typical revisionist BS. But yeah, they brought in the Von Erichs. They brought in Sid came in. First time I met Sid. Brought in a whole bunch of talent. First time I got to meet Fritz, who was just wonderful. I mean, you talk about a guy with an aura around him that, like, holy shit, this guy's something special, man. Had these massive big hands, and come in and shake hands with you. Nicest man in the world. And it was the memorial for Kerry. Bobby, I'm not sure who Bobby and I wrestled. I was trying to find it on Cage Match. We weren't listed, and we were there, but I don't remember who he wrestled or anything like that. But I remember meeting Fritz for the first time, and Sid. Sid was just this huge mountain of a man, and it was sad. We went to Kerry's funeral. They had his robe there and all this stuff, and man, Dallas. It's like Dallas shut down when Kerry passed away. It was remarkable, the love that people had for Kerry Von Erich. I remember I was sitting in an old country club down there just with some friends, a little small country club in Athens, Texas. Somebody told a story and said, man, that guy's a celebrity, like a Von Erich. And this is 30 years after Kerry died. That's how big Von Erichs were in Texas.
It's been said over the years that the Ultimate Warrior was allegedly supposed to be on that Kerry Von Erich tribute show, but no showed. Did you hear that at the time?
I don't remember. And I read that, and I don't remember if the Warrior was supposed to be, obviously the Dingo Warrior was a big deal in Dallas. They got him started. And I don't remember when I read that in the notes, it kind of struck a little bit of a nerve with me that maybe that happened, but I don't dispute that claim. But I can't remember if he was supposed to be there or not.
We got to talk a little bit about, when you're thinking about Dallas and you're thinking about global, everybody always thinks about, the way this thing came to an end. But you mentioned in passing that you met Fritz. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think that there would be an opportunity to work with Fritz, or did you know that, hey, he's completely out of this? And what was your expectation when you met Fritz? Did you think that, how did you regard him at that moment, I guess is what I'm looking for, and just his status in the business? Because it's always been weird that he's sort of in the business, but not really at this point. I mean, I know he's out and he's doing things, outside of wrestling, but when he sold to Jerry Jarrett, it was like he gave allegedly Jerry the heads up that, hey, my boys are going to mess this up. They're not business guys. But I've always been under the impression that he was still sort of keeping an eye on it. Did you ever have any inclination to think that he might actually get back into promoting, or was he heartbroken at that point based on the way things had turned out? What can you tell us about Fritz?
I talked to Akbar a lot about Fritz, and Ak and Fritz were very close. And so I had a pretty good feel about what Fritz was thinking and what Fritz was going to or not going to do. And I didn't think he was coming back, because when he got out, he got out. And, David was the one that wanted to go national, from what I understand, and not Fritz. Fritz did not want to, even though they had the best show there was. They had more cameras. They had the ring mic'd up. I mean, Fritz was groundbreaking in the stuff he did in the Sportatorium. He was a very, very smart guy. But when David passed away and then the territory kind of slipped from him, Fritz didn't have a desire to do it again. And he did not want to go national. He did not want to compete with Vince. He did not want to have to compete with, other promoters. He was very, very old school. When I met him, it was very similar to like the day I got to meet Tom Landry. It was Coach Landry. His son was a part owner, I think, in the San Antonio team. And I got to meet Coach Landry one time. And I just remember walking up and going, my God, man, this guy was with George Hallis. This guy was, I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I'm meeting Tom freaking Landry. I went up and shook his hand. He was just the nicest man. Meeting Fritz was the same. It was my childhood idol, the same as Coach Landry. And I got to meet him, and, I'm trying not to be the mark that I am. And, he knew it was special to me because the way I got up and went over and shook his hand in the dressing room. And it was just so cool to be sitting there holding the hand of, Fritz Von Erich, that Iron Claw, and being able to meet him and being able to talk to him just, at least superficially. Obviously in a very bad situation. It was a Kerry's memorial, but he was just nice as he could be to the guys. He went around and spoke to everybody. I mean, just an overwhelmingly nice man, but the figure that he carried, it was similar to Landry. in the fact that when he walked in a room, whether you knew him or not, you knew that was somebody special.
Well, somebody special is going to be coming into the territory. We're going to talk about Jim Crockett Jr. coming in. But before we do, I want us to just sort of run through some of the names that you would have worked with in this era. Guys like Black Bart, Johnny Mantell, John Tatum, Rod Price, Mike Davis, the Colossal Kongs, the Blackbirds, which was Action Jackson and Iceman King Parsons, easy for me to say. Sweet Daddy Falcone, Angel of Death, Chaz Taylor, Stephen Dane, Chris Adams, of course, Chris and Mark Youngblood. I mean, this is there's some real legends in there, but there's also some names that perhaps fans wouldn't even put together were actually there. You mentioned his real name earlier, Tony Norris, but we just sort of glossed over that. Tony Norris is better known to wrestling fans listening to this show as Ahmed Johnson.
Yeah.
You worked with Ahmed Johnson before he was Ahmed, but boy, he was doing a much different presentation back then. Tell us about it.
Yeah. And what I actually mentioned earlier when I was who I trained with with Brad was Charlie Norris, who had a bit of a Native American gimmick. Tony was in Dallas, and obviously this incredibly big, good-looking guy. And I think Booker and Stevie had already gone on, which we knew that they would. I mean, there was no doubt. When you saw Booker and Stevie the first time, you knew they're going to be somewhere. Ahmed was the same. I called him more Ahmed because of WWE than Tony. And I don't remember what his name was in Global. He was there with Crockett. I can't remember. But I worked with Tony a lot. And I had a great relationship with him. I know there's a ton of heat between him and a lot of boys out there, but I didn't have any of that. We were both working together a lot. I had pleasurable experiences with him. I had a pleasurable experience with him in WWE. So my feelings with him were, completely different from a lot of other guys that had, a lot of heat between him and them from WWE experience. But I had none of that. Tony was incredibly nice to me. I remember I went down one time to Houston and saw him. And, we were decent friends, not close, but good friends. And I had a really good relationship with him.
You got to go check him out if you've never seen early stuff from Tony Norris. Before he was Ahmed Johnson, he was going by the name Mo Adib, and he wore like these genie pants.
That's right. Yeah. I remember now. Yeah.
And my man was doing crazy stuff like dives to the floor and salts off the top rope and stuff that you wouldn't see Ahmed Johnson do in the WWF. But man, he was doing it here. Yes, he was green, but I mean, Ahmed Johnson as the Sabu type daredevil, that's just hard to even imagine, isn't it?
He was an incredible athlete. He got knocked out one time and three times in one match in WWE. He was working with Jeff Jarrett. And, you got to ask Jeff. I don't know. Jeff has accused me, rightfully so, because I love Jeff, the leader of the Four Horsemen, Jeff Jarrett, of having two different clotheslines, which I think that's just human nature. You got one for guys that you don't like very well. You got one for guys that you like and you want to work with. So I think it's human nature. Jeff has been accused of having two different guitars as well. So he hit Ahmed over the head with a guitar and knocked him cuckoo. So then Ahmed does that dive over on Dustin outside the floor.
Yeah,
well, Ahmed is 300 pounds.
Yeah,
I mean, Dustin did what he could, but he didn't break the fall hardly at all. I mean, like freaking like confetti just went through him, hit his head on the floor, and knocked himself out. Pretty cuckoo again. Well, then at the end of the match, he has to run to the back to chase Dustin. Well, he's out of it from these two from the guitar that was. Ask Jeff if it was the working guitar or the shoot. I don't know which one it was. And then the dive over, and Ahmed missed the curtain, and he hit the pole on the side. They had those solid poles. He hit that pole on his side, and that's where they had to get him on the ambulance. Knocked himself flat. I don't know about flat out, but he couldn't get up. I mean, he did a lot of damage to himself. I mean, he was just a mistake. But man, it was a rough night for Tony.
I want to spend just a minute here and talk about what happens in 1994 when GWF closes. But they're going to open back up, and we're going to talk about that. But before I do, when the Freebirds come back in 1994, Jimmy Garvin has his, we'll call it his pilot haircut, but Terry Gordy is going to be coming back after an overdose.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of discussion that he was not the same Terry Gordy that we saw before. And if you were watching the WWF in '96 when he showed up as the Executioner, I think we all were pretty hopeful that this could be his big break, and we know that it just wasn't in the cards. You had to be a fan of Terry Gordy when they come back in '94, and you see that Michael Hayes is injured, so he's going to be working as their manager. But you've got Hayes and Gordy and Garvin. This is a cool outfit. What was your experience like with Gordy? Had he lost a step? Did you know that right away? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. In fact, when he was in WWE as the Executioner, he worked with Rocky over in Kuwait or somewhere, and he turned in the old Gordy for about 15 seconds and hit Rocky the clothesline. I'm sure Rocky still feels. Rocky's like, what the hell just happened? Gordy came back somehow for about 15 seconds. Terry was, he had the issues and the overdose on the plane. He wasn't the same guy, not even close. Terry's one of the biggest big men, best big men in the history of the business. He and Doc were, man, that tag team was freaking amazing. I stole a lot of stuff from Gordy. I got my clothesline from Gordy. I just saw a clip where I went for a power bomb on Tommy Dreamer, and Dreamer backdropped me. I held on and landed with Dreamer on top of me, rolled over, hit him with that. I got that from Gordy. A lot of stuff I got from Gordy. In fact, I stole so much stuff from Gordy that the first time I worked with him, I'm thinking, this guy's stealing my shit. literally, I thought that for a second. Then I started laughing. I go, oh my God, I stole his so long ago that I forgot about it. But that clothesline I throw, that came from Terry Gordy. He threw it exactly like I throw it. Now he didn't do the running quite as he didn't do the running quite as much as I did, but the whole thing from the clothesline was from Terry Gordy, and it was great to be out there with him. He had lost. I don't know if he should have been back or not. That's up to him and his family. He was still able to, 50% of Terry Gordy still ain't bad. He wasn't the Gordy that he was before, but he could, for the most part, he could get through things. And, especially guys that could work with him. Having those guys back, the Freebirds, I remember I was in the ring one time, and then Michael's going to come down strutting and doing all his stuff. And he goes, hey, man, just for old time's sake, will you mind giving us the ring? And I said, of course not. I remember getting out of the ring, just watching. And going, man, this is free. That place went, as Pat would say, banana. It was unbelievable how loud it was in the Sportatorium when the Freebirds walked down that aisle again. It was just, and to be in the ring, to see them coming to you, man, it was something I'd have paid for. It was unbelievable.
I can just hear how much passion you have in your voice, because I know you grew up, a Freebird guy, and I just think that's cool. I do want to ask you about it coming to an end. I know you thought a lot of Gray Pearson, and he's going to fold up shop on September 21st, 1994. It's written in the Observer. When the group was evicted by the management of the Dallas Sportatorium for being 13 weeks behind in paying rent. While this is not official, it's believed a 90% chance that Jim Crockett will open up a new Dallas-based promotion running the traditional Friday night at the Sportatorium on either October 14th or the 21st. Crockett has said he won't take over the building unless he has adequate television in the market. And, of course, there's lots of criticism in the Observer, where the readers of the Observer voted that the Global Wrestling Federation was the worst promotion of the year in 1992, and said that they had the worst television show in 92 and 93. I guess Dave would write that Gray had lost a lot of money running Global, and he's claiming to the wrestlers that he's got new financing from Kuwait, and he's going to open up and start running again in a new building in Arlington, Texas, but he doesn't have a start date. How do you hear that Global is going under? What did you think of this report that Gray will start up again? And how did you receive the rumors that perhaps Crockett's coming in?
I thought it was great, Crockett coming in. And by the way, I want to mention to him before I forget, the Colossal Kongs, that tag team should have gone somewhere. I can't believe Vince didn't get those guys. I mean, now, by the way, they were as stiff as anybody I've ever wrestled. But they were taken the same way. They would hit you so freaking hard. Those were two huge men that could work. I don't know why they didn't end up with Vince or WCW or somebody. But we heard weekly.
A cup of coffee.
What's that?
They were with Harley in WCW for a cup of coffee.
Oh, that's right. They were. They did go up there. That's right. Yeah, they were. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I just you mentioned the Colossal Kongs, and they were good friends. I brought them down to Mexico when I was down there, and oh my God, they were so stiff. Guys didn't want to work with them because they were so stiff. But they took it the same way, but nobody cared because they didn't want to get hit that hard.
Right.
You could hit them as hard as you want. They, they're 450 pounds and big, tough guys. But we heard weekly almost that somebody's stepping in, not a Nigerian prince, not the Kuwaiti sheik or whoever, but it was weekly that somebody was stepping in. There was all kinds of rumors about, we're going to do this, we're going to open up that. Everybody was always talking about opening up. After a while, it just becomes white noise. And I think Gray, Gray was a smart guy, is a smart guy. I don't know him now, but, I knew him then. Nice man. And, smart guy. I'm sure he was working with a lot of people to try to salvage it. It was just something that was almost unsalvageable. It's hard to open up somewhere else. It's hard to get people to start paying for wrestling. Gray had figured out a model that worked with paying people pay for parking and pay for concessions. But I had heard that for the entire time I was there, that somebody was stepping in. It was always somebody different. Somebody was going to come in. I was very excited about Jimmy Crockett coming in, because I'd heard so much about him and so many good things. We had a lot of guys who had worked for Crockett. Bart had worked for him. So many guys had. And I was very excited when I heard that Jimmy Crockett was potentially coming in.
One of the things we know he's going to do is go to all paid admission, no more comps. Maybe he's pretty old school here. What was your first immediate impression of Mr. Crockett? I mean, clearly we know his reputation, once upon a time, he had the wrestling world, I would say in his back pocket, but I guess in honor of his dad, in his front shirt pocket. But what was your experience like with Mr. Crockett?
Tremendous. Mr. Crockett was going to use me and use me well. He was going to use Tony Norris well. And so Mr. Crockett would call me in. He called me up to his ice cream store in Dallas a couple times just to sit down and talk to me about the business. He was really grooming me for something in the business that he wanted to do. And so I loved it. I mean, I'm getting one of these legendary promoters who's done so much in this business, a second generation guy. And he's opening up the whole Pandora's box to me about what he's going to do and why he's doing it. So he would not only explain to me the finish, he would tell me why he's doing it, which was so cool. I mean, Mr. Crockett, I don't know how he was with others. He was a very patient man and a very understanding guy. I had what I think was a terrific relationship with Mr. Crockett, a very short one, but a terrific relationship with Mr. Crockett.
I just held him in such high regard. I mean, I love his products, but he was such a gracious man. I'm a big fan of his. And I know that he's going to bring in some of his guys. He's going to bring in the Rock and Roll Express. He's going to bring in Dick Murdoch. And I think he even puts you in a title match there, right?
He did, yeah. I don't think I won the title. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but he tagged me up with Dick a lot, and Dick Murdoch, and a lot of that was, again, he's teaching guys taught on the road. Bart was in that role. He put me with Murdoch so I'd learn from Murdoch, and I did. I mean, it was, by the way, Murdoch had a Coors Light deal, and we'd go around Texas. He was paid to go drink in bars.
He had some sort of card, right, where he drank free everywhere he went.
Correct. Yeah. Everywhere he went, he knew everybody. I mean, it was crazy. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Only Coors Light. We go to bars. He wouldn't let me drink with him. I had to go sit somewhere else, and I go with him, but I would drink. We got into a fight with a bunch of fans one night, and apparently I did okay. So he told me, he goes, "Kid, you can drink with us today. Just don't say a fucking word." I said, "All right, Dick, thank you." And I just sit there and just listen to Dick talk. I didn't care, I'm sitting there with this legend, But Mr. Crockett stuck me with Murdoch because he wanted me to learn, and thank goodness he did, because that was really cool.
Listen, one of the things we often hear is, if you paper a town too much, you're going to kill the town.
Yep.
And I guess my question is, after Gray had been doing a different model where people are paying for parking and paying for concessions, but tickets were free, when Crockett comes in and starts trying to charge admission, How did it work?
Horrible. It did not work at all. Not at all. It was I don't know if it was a bad idea, but it did not work. I mean, we weren't drawing 200 people in sport. We went from 2,500 to 200. I mean, you couldn't even hardly fill up ringside. It was terrible. And people just weren't used to doing it, and I understand the model. I told you how Vince thinks about it. Paying fans treat the product differently. That's why Vince wouldn't over paper a lot of arenas. Crockett was the same way. And we just weren't drawing anything. And it looked awful on television. I mean, terrible. We had great talent, man. You had Greg Valentine was there, Murdoch, the Rock and Roll Boys, all the Texas boys. You had great talent, good shows, but it looked awful. It looked like it was in an empty barn in the Sportatorium.
Yeah, I mean, I've read that you couldn't even fill up the front row. I mean,
we were in. By the way, we were in Waco one time, and Crockett got crosswise with the Heart of Texas Arena somehow. They wouldn't even put wrestling on the outside billboard. So I'm working with Greg Valentine. I don't know what we had. I think we had 27 people in that 14,000 seat arena, something like that. It was it couldn't even fill up the first row of ringside. And I thought, well, anyway, Crockett goes, run the full show. He was mad at the promoter. Johnny Valentine shows up. And when Johnny Valentine showed up, Greg turned into an MMA fighter. He was like, my dad's here. I'm going to kill you. And like, oh, my God. Greg wouldn't let me go home. We're like 25, 30 minutes in front of 27 people. We did over a minute for every person in the freaking arena. And Greg beat the living shit out of me. It was awesome. I love Greg Valentine. I'm glad his dad's not there when I'm wrestling him now. But I'm glad I'm not wrestling him now. But oh, my God. When you see Johnny Valentine, he come in, because he had that plane crash, you'll see him come in on those walkers, and you'd see him. And, man, he talked about a legend, man. He would sit there, and he loved to talk about the business, which is so cool because I got to hear from Johnny Valentine himself. But, man, when he was there, Greg Valentine, holy shit. Whoo, Lordy.
I do want to ask, when you're finishing up with Global and, I mean, how do you leave things with Crockett? I know that, the whole territory doesn't really work out the way, everybody envisioned. And obviously you're going to go on to bigger and better things, but this is almost like a swan song for Crockett here.
Yeah.
He's going to take one last stab at things in 1994. And then it feels like he moves on. And you mentioned that he had the ice cream store.
Yeah.
But, once upon a time, this was the guy who was in the trenches battling Vince McMahon. I mean, it predated the rivalry with Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff. What do you remember sort of your swan song being with Mr. Crockett in the territory?
I think Crockett was, I don't want to say heartbroken. I think Crockett was perplexed. He thought he could come into Texas and make it work. And I don't think anybody could make it work. It was so burned. You had so many spot shows that, these bullshit local promoters would run and advertise people that weren't going to be there and take people's money. It was really run poorly. The whole freaking area of the state was run really poorly. And I think when Crockett came in, he didn't realize how bad it was. And I think it just kind of perplexed him that, man, I'm bringing in talent. I got great shows. Everything's working, but nobody's showing up. And I think it was the state of wrestling in that area in Texas, the fallout from the Von Erichs, the fallout from all the stuff that had happened of so many people get screwed out of money for so long. And Gray Pearson, by the way, never, as far as I know, screwed one person out of money. Gray was not one of those bad guys. I think Crockett was just perplexed about the whole thing. Ran a couple shows there at the end, and that was it. And I always felt bad, because I really enjoyed Mr. Crockett. I enjoyed our conversations I had with him. I enjoyed the way he did things. It just didn't work. And I think Crockett was kind of like, you got to be kidding me. I can't make Texas work as hot as it is, but he didn't know how bad Texas was.
Well, I'll tell you, sometimes we all need a little help with our business. And that's why in my business, I know who to call. Envision Marketing Consultants. I think everybody listening to this knows I call myself Conrad the Mortgage Guy on social media. I've been doing mortgages since 2001. But in 2009, I decided, hey, let's double down. Let's start advertising. Let's try to grow this thing. So I bought billboard. I bought radio. I bought TV. And I knew people were consuming things differently. I knew I needed to have an online presence, but I didn't really know where to get started. Well, thankfully, my TV and radio reps, they were there to help take my money. That is, it didn't work. And I was lost. And then I found Envision Marketing. And I feel so strongly about it. I'm putting my stamp of approval on it. Go check out Eric Nichols and my guys in Envision right now at conradsguy.com. They can help you grow your small business. Well, no matter what it is you do, if you've done any SEO or you need pay-per-click, maybe you're curious about targeted display. Maybe it'd be nice to have some streaming video ads on Hulu or YouTube or Amazon. If your company's doing any of that or they need to, go right now to conradsguy.com. Let my guy Eric take a look. He can help you if you're doing B2B or retail or food and beverage or manufacturing or nonprofits. And he sure as hell knows how to do mortgages too. No matter what you do, if you're looking to grow your business, you need the expertise. It's not like you break your arm and you run on down to Jiffy Lube. You don't need to be buying digital marketing from your radio and TV rep. Go with who knows the industry. That's what I trust most about Eric, is not only does he know what he's doing, he's keeping up as it changes. I mean, even here on YouTube, people talk about the algorithm. That's not like they said it once and forgot about it, like a Ronco back in the day. It's constantly evolving. You need somebody who's going to stay on top of that. And my guy, conradsguy.com, is Eric at Envision Marketing Consultants. Check it out and grow your business the way I did at conradsguy.com. So listen, man, you know, the global experience is a famous story. It starts with this Nigerian millionaire. Maybe it goes out without a whimper, but along the way, you know, there's everybody trying to make money in Dallas. Fritz von Erich and Jerry Jarrett and Joe Pedicino and Jimmy Crockett. And then eventually it just sort of withers up and dies. But when you think about the good times with global, what is the highlight that you go to?
Oh my God, so many. You know, the highlight, you know, as they say, when you look at the business, you miss the things like the car rides. You know, I got to ride with Dick Murdoch. I got to ride with Skandar Akbar, Killer Tim Brooks, and James Beard. I got to ride with Kevin. You know, I got to be in the ring when the Freebirds came back. I got to walk down that aisle to Iron Man with Kerry. You know, I got to wrestle Kevin. I got to shake Fritz von Erich's hand in the Sportatorium, a place that I grew up thinking this is the greatest place in the history of the world. And then I also got to work very closely with a man who was very patient with me in Jimmy Crockett, you know, this legendary promoter who did so much for this business. You know, I'm if I had missed this, I would have missed out something that I'm right now eternally grateful for. You know, I look at guys right now and how their progression into like the main roster. I had some of the greatest mentors. I had some of the greatest people who explained the business to me, from Black Bart to you name it, everybody out there that was in the Sportatorium. I don't know how they get to where they need to be without that educational background. This was it's like going to Harvard for professional wrestling. And I learned so much from so many people that were so over. I learned every single part of the business from being there at the Sportatorium. I mean, I am so thankful that I got to work in that rotten old building and work with so many great, incredible legends.
Well, I can hear it in your voice how much you hold in high regard your time in Dallas. And it is an interesting place, man. There's nowhere quite like Texas. But next week, we're going to be talking about one of Oklahoma's finest.
Oh, my God. There is no such thing.
Next week, our topic, John, is your friend and mine, the one and only, the legend himself, Mr. Jerry Briscoe.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. One of the luckiest things I've had in my life was being friends with Ron Simmons and Gerald Briscoe. And I'm one of the luckiest men alive to have friends like that for 30 plus years. So to get to talk about Jerry is something that's really cool. Hey, and by the way, one other thing in the Sportatorium, you know, Ronnie Coleman used to come down there all the time. You know, when he was a cop in Dallas, not all the time, but regularly when he was a cop in Dallas, you know, this 6 or 7 time Mr. Olympia, whatever he held.
The most decorated, yes, of all time.
Yeah, that's right. Ronnie came down there several times. I got to meet Ronnie a few times down there. You know, got this police officer with these freaking, it just looked like a freaking statue. You know, it's it was pretty cool. The people that came down there.
I can't wait for us to spend a little bit of time talking about Mr. Briscoe next week. But in the meantime, if you need,
hey, by the way, I want to mention this before the little teaser for next week. Briscoe told me one time, he said, just talking, he said, I worked with Buddy Rogers and Joe Louis was my referee. And I said, wait a minute. You kind of glossed over that. You what? He has been around so much because of his ties with Leroy McGurk, because of his brother, and so many things that he's been able to do. I mean, Jerry's been there for so many of wrestling's history since the late 1960s. It's really a remarkable career.
John, I'm pretty excited. I know you and I haven't spent a lot of time chatting this week, but I had some really incredible developments business-wise this week. It's big for wrestling fans. It's big for sports fans. There's going to be some big announcements coming soon. We may actually be looking for investors soon. So you and I should talk offline because I think this is about to be a big opportunity. But next week, our opportunity is to talk about Jerry Briscoe and to hold you over. If you just can't get enough John Layfield and you're a big fan of Mr. Briscoe, why not check out their podcast? It's Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. You can enjoy that podcast anywhere you enjoy podcasts, including YouTube, including Apple, including Spotify. But we're talking hundreds of guests through history. It is a who's who of professional wrestling. They've talked to them all. Check it out anywhere you enjoy podcasts. Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. And John, I'm going to be watching Elimination Chamber this weekend. Are you watching the big pay-per-view or are you booked somewhere? Where are you at?
Nope. I am off this weekend and I am looking forward to watching it. I'm finally feeling better. So I'm going to watch a little bit of wrestling this weekend and I am really looking forward to it. Oh, and by the way, on our podcast, we just had the Alien Perspective guys from the film about the Rendlesham Forest, the Tic Tac UFO video. And I've got the UFO expert, the Blue Meanie. Who has joined us. I told Conrad, for those that are out there, I said, Blue Meanie's a UFO expert.
No, you just actually mentioned that. It's a paragraph. We're on the phone. We're going back and forth, and John talks for 2 minutes, and then when he finishes, I said, do you realize right in the middle of your sentence there, or right in the middle of your story, you just slid the sentence in, well, the Blue Meanie's a UFO expert, comma, and it's like, wait. You just said that like that's a well-known thing, like there's even such a thing as a UFO expert, but I guess there is, and Blue Meanie is that. Check it out anywhere you enjoy podcasts, Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw, and we'll be back next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.